What if Luffy got a solo leveling system? Okay, hear me out. We're talking about the guy who already punches way above his weight class, suddenly getting access to the most broken RPG mechanics in existence. Stats, levels, shadow armies, the works. But here's the twist that makes this absolutely wild, and every time he uses the system's power, it burns through his actual lifespan. So now Luffy's got to choose, save his crew, and sacrifice years of his life, or play it safe and watch people suffer. And knowing our rubber boy, yeah, he's gonna pick his friends every single time, even if it kills him. This story is pure insanity from start to finish. Corrupted warlords with stolen systems, Sky Island gods drunk on power, and a finale where Luffy literally has to choose between becoming the Pirate King or saving the entire world. Drop a like if you're ready for this chaos, and let's jump right in.
The platform creaked under Luffy's knees. Funny how he could hear that over the roar of the crowd. Thousands of people packed into Logtown's execution square, some cheering for his death, others just curious to see another pirate bite it. The wood felt rough against his shins, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered if Gold Roger had felt the same splinters digging into his skin 22 years ago. "Any last words?" Buggy's voice crackled with glee, the massive axe glinting in the afternoon sun. Luffy grinned. He couldn't help it, even with death staring him in the face. The same words that had started this whole mess bubbled up from his chest. "I'm gonna be king of the pirates," the crowd exploded. Half of them screamed in outrage, the other half laughed like he'd told the world's funniest joke. Buggy raised the axe high, showboating for his audience, and Luffy caught a glimpse of his crew fighting desperately through the mob below. Zoro's swords flashed silver, Sanji's legs blurred as he kicked through Marines, and Nami was shouting something he couldn't hear over the chaos. They were too far away. They wouldn't make it in time. The axe began its descent. Lightning split the sky, not the kind of lightning that comes with storms. This was different. Green-tinged, crackling with something that made Luffy's teeth ache and his bones hum. It slammed into the execution platform like the fist of an angry god, and suddenly everything was white noise and ozone and pain that felt like being turned inside out. Luffy hit the ground hard enough to crack cobblestones. His ears were ringing, his vision was doing this weird swimwy thing, and there was smoke everywhere. But he was alive. Definitely alive, because dead people probably didn't taste copper pennies and feel like they'd been stuffed into a washing machine. Someone was pulling him up, strong hands, familiar voice cutting through the fog in his head. "Can you move?" "Dad," the word slipped out before Luffy could stop it. Through the smoke and chaos, he caught a glimpse of a face that looked almost like his own, weathered by years and responsibility he couldn't imagine. Dragon didn't answer, but his grip tightened. "The Revolutionary Army will watch your progress with great interest, Monkey D. Luffy." Then he was gone, vanished into the storm he'd brought with him, and Luffy was stumbling through streets that had turned into warfare. Marines everywhere, his crew shouting his name, Smoker's voice bellowing orders that got lost in the wind and rain. They made it to the ship somehow. Luffy's legs felt like rubber, more than usual, and his head wouldn't stop spinning, but they made it. The Mary's deck felt solid under his feet as they sailed out of Logtown's harbor, and for a few minutes he just stood there, breathing salt air and trying to figure out why his left eye kept twitching. Luffy, Nami grabbed his shoulders, shaking him hard enough to rattle his teeth. "Are you okay? That lightning hit you directly." "I'm fine," he said automatically, then paused. Was he fine? Everything felt different. Like someone had rewired his brain while he wasn't paying attention. "Actually, I think..." The blue screen popped up right in front of his face. Luffy yelped and stumbled backward, pointing at the translucent rectangle floating in the air. "What the hell is that? What's what?" Zoro looked where he was pointing, frowned. "There's nothing there. The big blue thing with the words." Luffy waved his hands through the screen, but they passed right through it. The text stayed put, glowing softly against the evening sky. "System initialization complete. Welcome, Inheritor of Joy Boy. Bloodline verification. Confirmed. Unlocking basic interface." Usopp circled around him, squinting. "I don't see anything either. Maybe you got brain damage from the lightning." "There's no brain damage," Luffy snapped, then immediately felt bad about it. His crew was just worried. But the screen was right there, big as life, and they couldn't see it. "There's really nothing there." Sanji lit a cigarette, studying Luffy's face. "You're acting weird, even for you." More text scrolled across the blue rectangle, accompanied by a soft chiming sound that made Luffy's bones vibrate. "Generating initial status. Analyzing current capabilities. Warning, host physical condition suboptimal. Initiating basic diagnostic." A new window opened beside the first one, filled with numbers and bars and terms that made Luffy's head hurt. Monkey D. Luffy, level 1 strength, 12/100 agility, 15/100 endurance, 18/100 intelligence, 8/100 will, infinity special abilities. GOMU fruit active, conquerors HAKI dormant, observation HAKI locked, armament HAKI locked, current status. Confused but enthusiastic, my intelligence is only 8, Luffy said aloud, genuinely offended. You're what now? Nami was giving him that look she got when she was deciding whether to hit him or call Chopper. Well, they didn't have Chopper yet, but the principle was the same. Luffy opened his mouth to explain, then stopped. How could he explain something they couldn't see? And what was this thing anyway? Some kind of power, magic. The lightning had definitely done something to him, but this felt older than that. Like it had been waiting inside him his whole life, just needing the right spark to wake up. Joy Boy. The system had called him the Inheritor of Joy Boy. He'd heard that name before, hadn't he? Somewhere in the back of his memory, like a song he'd forgotten the words to. First quest available, the chime came again, and a third window popped up, this one outlined in gold. Quest, reach Reverse Mountain, objective. Successfully navigate the entrance to the Grand Line reward, crew protection protocol bonus objectives, time limit, none accept, decline. Luffy stared at the floating buttons. This was insane. But then again, he'd eaten a rubber fruit that gave him stretchy powers, so maybe insane was just Tuesday in his world. And they were already heading for Reverse Mountain anyway. He reached out and poked the accept button. Quest accepted, system tutorial will begin upon quest completion. Good luck, future Pirate King. The windows faded away, leaving Luffy blinking at empty air. His crew was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. So, Zoro said slowly, "Want to tell us what that was about?" Luffy scratched the back of his head, grinning despite himself. How could he explain that some kind of weird power had just woken up inside him? That floating blue screens were giving him quests like this was all some kind of game. That something called the system thought he was the inheritor of a legendary figure from 800 years ago. "I think the lightning did something to me," he said finally. "Something cool how?" Nami's voice had that dangerous edge that meant she was about 3 seconds from violence. "I don't know yet, but I can feel it, you know. Like there's this thing inside me that wasn't there before." He tapped his chest right over his heart. "It's like it's been sleeping my whole life and now it's awake." Sanji blew out smoke. "And you're not worried that mysterious lightning powers might be, I don't know, dangerous?" "Nah." Luffy's grin widened. "If it was gonna hurt me, it would have done it already. Besides, I've got you guys. What's the worst that could happen?" The words were barely out of his mouth when another window flickered into existence, smaller this time, hovering at the edge of his vision like a whisper. "Warning, approaching trials detected, difficulty. Unknown, prepare yourself, Inheritor, the Grand Line awaits." Luffy blinked and the message was gone. But something cold had settled in his stomach, mixing with the excitement that always came before a good fight. Trials. The Grand Line was already supposed to be the most dangerous ocean in the world, and now something was telling him it was going to test him specifically. He looked out at the horizon, where the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and red. Somewhere out there, past the calm belt and the towering mountain of water, lay the adventure he'd been dreaming of his whole life. And now he had, whatever this was, this system, this power that thought he was someone special. "Hey guys," he said, not taking his eyes off the sunset. "I've got a feeling the Grand Line's gonna be even more fun than we thought." Usopp made a small whimpering sound. "Why do you say things like that?" "Because," Luffy said, and that old familiar excitement was building in his chest, mixing with something new and electric and full of potential. "I think someone's been waiting for me." The Mary sailed on through the gathering dusk, carrying them toward Reverse Mountain and whatever trials lay beyond. And deep in Luffy's mind, something ancient and patient smiled and began to plan. Behind them, in the smoke and chaos of Logtown, Smoker stood on the dock and watched their ship disappear into the darkness. His cigars had gone out in the storm, but he didn't bother relighting them. There was something about that Straw Hat Kid, something that had changed in those few seconds when the lightning struck. "Captain Smoker," Tashigi appeared at his elbow, her glasses fogged from the humidity. "Orders, sir." Smoker was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Put in a request to headquarters. I want to be transferred to Grand Line duty." "Sir." "Why?" He finally lit a fresh cigar, the flame illuminating his face in the darkness. "Because I've got a feeling that boy is going to change everything." The flame went out, and Smoker disappeared into the smoke, leaving only the echo of his words and the feeling that something momentous had just begun. Far above, hidden in storm clouds that were already dissipating, Dragon watched his son's ship fade into the distance. The power had awakened, just as the ancient texts had promised. Now came the real test: would Monkey D. Luffy prove worthy of the burden he'd inherited, Or would the Grand Line break him like it had broken so many others who tried to claim the title of Pirate King? Only time would tell. But Dragon found himself smiling as he turned away. If there was one thing he knew about his son, it was that the boy had never met a challenge he wouldn't face with a grin and his fists raised. The Grand Line had no idea what was coming. The Grand Line hit them like a slap in the face. One minute they were sailing through relatively calm waters, arguing about whether the weird upside-down mountain ahead of them was real or some kind of mirage. And the next minute their world had turned into a washing machine full of angry sea kings and physics that had apparently decided to take a vacation. "This is insane," Nami screamed over the roar of rushing water, her knuckles white as she gripped the wheel. "Water doesn't flow uphill. Tell that to the water." Usopp wailed from somewhere near the mast, his arms wrapped around the rigging like his life depended on it. Which, to be fair, it probably did. Luffy stood at the bow, grinning like a maniac as the Mary shot up the canal that cut through Reverse Mountain. The wind whipped his hair back and filled his lungs with salt spray and something else, something that made his whole body buzz with energy he'd never felt before. Approaching Grand Line entrance, quest objective. Navigate successfully, current progress. 67%, the blue screens were back, flickering at the edge of his vision like helpful ghosts. His crew still couldn't see them, and Luffy had given up trying to explain. How do you tell people that floating windows were giving you mission updates like life was some kind of game? There, Nami pointed ahead where the canal curved sharply. "The summit, if we can just..." The Mary shot over the peak like a cork from a bottle, and suddenly they were flying. Actually flying, suspended in midair for one perfect, terrifying moment while the ocean spread out below them in all directions. Luffy could see everything from up here, the four canals meeting at impossible angles, the vast expanse of the Grand Line stretching to the horizon, and directly ahead. Whale, the thing was massive, not just big. Luffy had seen big sea kings before. This was mountainous, a living island of black flesh that blocked out half the sky, and they were falling straight toward it. Warning, obstacle detected species. Island whale threat level, minimal to moderate emotional state, severe distress wait, emotional state. The system could read emotions. Luffy's enhanced senses, when had they gotten enhanced, picked up something else as they plummeted toward the whale's head. Not just size, not just the obvious danger of hitting something that big at terminal velocity. There was sadness, deep, bone-aching loneliness that made his chest tight. This thing was in pain. "Everyone hold on," he shouted, but his crew was already bracing for impact. The whale's head rushed up to meet them, black as night and solid as a cliff face. They hit with a crash that should have splintered the Mary into toothpicks. Instead, they actually bounced, off the whale's head and went skittering across the water like a skipped stone. "What the hell?" Zoro picked himself up from where he'd been thrown against the mainmast. "That should have killed us." Luffy was already looking around, trying to figure out what had just happened when the whale made a sound. It wasn't quite a roar, wasn't quite a song. It was pure anguish-given voice, a cry so full of longing and loss that it made Luffy's heart twist in his chest. The sound rolled across the water like thunder, and somewhere in the depths of it, he could swear he heard words. "Lonely. So lonely, come back, please come back." New quest available. The golden window popped up, brighter than before. Quest, befriend the lonely whale. Objective, ease Laboon's suffering. Current approach. Violence success rate 12%. Suggested approach. Compassion success rate 78%. Reward, beast communication, bonus EXP special condition. Creative solution grants additional rewards. Laboon. The whale's name was Laboon. "Luffy," Nami's voice cut through his thoughts. "We need to get out of here before..." Laboon's massive tail came crashing down where the Mary had been floating a second before. Only Nami's quick thinking had gotten them out of the way, but the whale wasn't giving up. It was chasing them, and something about the way it moved told Luffy this wasn't really an attack. It was desperate. Like a dog chasing cars, not because it wanted to hurt them, but because it didn't know what else to do. "Wait," Luffy said, standing up despite the chaos around them. "I want to talk to it." "Talk to what?" Sanji grabbed him before he could do something stupid like jump overboard. "It's a whale, Luffy, a really big, really angry whale." "It's not angry." Luffy pulled free, that strange certainty growing stronger in his chest. "It's sad, really, really sad." Without waiting for anyone to stop him, he stretched his arm out and grabbed onto Laboon's head. His crew shouted protests behind him, but he was already flying through the air, rubber limbs carrying him toward the whale's massive eye. Beast communication activating. Warning. Untrained use of ability. Proceed with caution. Luffy landed on Laboon's head with a wet thump, right in front of an eye the size of a house. The whale went still, as if surprised to find this tiny human perched on its skull. "Hey there," Luffy said softly, placing his palm against the surprisingly warm skin. "I'm Luffy. What's wrong?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world exploded into sensation. Images flooded his mind, not his own memories, but Laboon's. A younger whale, smaller but still massive, swimming alongside a ship with a Jolly Roger he didn't recognize. Laughter echoing across the water. Songs sung under starlit skies, the warm feeling of belonging, of being part of something bigger than yourself. Then pain, the ship sailing away, promising to return, days of waiting, months, years. The slow realization that they weren't coming back, that he was alone at the end of the world with nothing but his grief and the lighthouse keeper who fed him and told him stories he barely understood. 50 years of waiting. 50 years of hope turning slowly to despair. "Oh," Luffy whispered, and his voice was thick with tears he hadn't realized were falling. "Oh, buddy, I'm so sorry." Laboon's eye focused on him, and Luffy felt a tremor of surprise ripple through the connection between them. This human understood. This human could feel his pain. Beast communication successful, emotional connection established, quest progress. 34%. "They're not coming back, are they?" Luffy asked gently. "The people you're waiting for." The wave of grief that hit him nearly knocked him off the whale's head. 50 years of accumulated sorrow, of hope deferred until it curdled into something that ate you alive from the inside. "I know," Luffy said, and meant it. "I know it hurts, but hurting yourself won't bring them back." He could feel his crew watching from the Mary, probably thinking he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But the system hummed in the back of his thoughts, approving, encouraging, and somehow he knew this was important. Not just for the quest, but for something bigger. "Tell you what," he said, grinning despite the tears still running down his face. "I can't bring your friends back, but I can make you a promise. When I become king of the pirates, and I will become king of the pirates, I'll come back here, and we'll sail together just once around the whole world. How's that sound?" Laboon's eye widened, and Luffy felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. "But you have to stop trying to hurt yourself, okay? No more ramming your head into the red line. Your friends wouldn't want that." He patted the massive head gently. "They'd want you to be happy, to make new friends, to live." The silence stretched between them, filled with possibility and the sound of waves against Laboon's flanks. Then slowly the whale began to sing. It wasn't the anguished cry from before. This was different, still sad, but with something else woven through it. Acceptance, maybe, or the first fragile shoots of hope breaking through 50 years of winter. Quest completed, creative solution bonus activated, massive EXP gain level up. Beast communication acquired, Shadow Marine slot unlocked, special ability. Pain sense acquired, the rush of power hit him like a physical thing, warm and electric and somehow right. Luffy gasped as his stats rearranged themselves, as new knowledge flooded into his brain. He could hear things now, not just Laboon's thoughts, but the whisper of fish in the deep water, the contentment of seabirds wheeling overhead, even the strange, patient thoughts of the lighthouse that rose from Laboon's back. Wait, the lighthouse was alive. Lighthouse keeper, Crocus status, aware of ancient powers, threat level, minimal knowledge level, significant well, a gravelly voice said behind him. Haven't seen power like that in a long time. Luffy spun around to find an old man sitting in a beach chair, reading a newspaper like it was perfectly normal to be perched on top of a whale in the middle of the ocean. He had a flower sticking out of his head, and the kind of eyes that had seen way too much of the world's weirdness to be surprised by anything. "You can see it?" Luffy asked, gesturing vaguely at the space where his system windows hung invisible. "Not see exactly." The old man, Crocus, the system had called him, folded his newspaper and studied Luffy with those ancient eyes. "But I can feel it, like an old song you half remember. You've awakened something that's been sleeping for a very long time, boy. What do you know about it?" Crocus was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the horizon. "I sailed with a man once who carried a similar burden. Different power, same weight, it didn't end well for him." "Gall D. Roger," Luffy said, and it wasn't a question. "Smart boy," Crocus smiled, but it was sad around the edges. Roger could hear the voice of all things. Made him sensitive to suffering he couldn't always fix, drove him half-mad some days. He looked back at Luffy. "What you've got feels older though, deeper, like it's been waiting." Historical data confirmed, previous system user. Gold Roger system type, partial awakening, current user, full potential detected. "It has been waiting," Luffy said softly. "For me, I think." "Then you'd better be worthy of it." Crocus stood up, joints creaking. "Power like that comes with a price, always does. The question is whether you're willing to pay it." Before Luffy could ask what he meant, the old man was walking away, disappearing into the lighthouse like he'd never been there at all. But his words hung in the air, heavy with warning and possibility. Luffy looked down at Laboon's eye, still focused on him with something that might have been trust. "I'll be back," he promised again. "That's not just a maybe. That's a guarantee." The whale sang again, softer this time, and Luffy felt the meaning of it wash over him. "I'll wait, but not forever. This time I'll live while I wait." Permanent bond established. Laboon, ally acquired, future support guaranteed. Luffy grinned and stretched his way back to the Mary, where his crew was waiting with expressions that ranged from worried to completely baffled. "So," Zoro said as Luffy landed on deck. "Want to explain what just happened?" "I made a friend," Luffy said simply, "and I think I'm starting to understand what this thing in my head actually does." "Which is?" Nami crossed her arms, looking skeptical. Luffy paused, trying to find words for something that felt too big for language. "It helps me help people, really helps them, not just punch their problems away." He touched his chest, where the system's warmth had settled like a second heartbeat. "I can feel when things are hurting now, when they need something I might be able to give." "That sounds," Usopp swallowed hard, "that sounds like it could drive you crazy." "Maybe," Luffy's grin widened. "But it also sounds like exactly what a pirate king should be able to do." As they sailed away from Reverse Mountain, Laboon's song following them across the water, Luffy felt something shift inside him. The system was still there, still offering quests and power-ups and all the strange game-like mechanics that made no sense. But underneath all that, he could feel its real purpose. It wasn't about making him stronger, not really. It was about making him better, about giving him the tools to keep promises like the one he'd just made to a lonely whale at the edge of the world. System evolution, 2%, new abilities unlocked, pain sense. Can detect suffering in living beings, beast communication. Can understand and communicate with animals, shadow marine. Can summon spectral ally in combat, warning, approaching inhabited island, threat level. Moderate recommended approach. Cautious investigation ahead of them, an island was growing on the horizon. Palm trees and sandy beaches that looked like paradise, but Luffy's new senses were picking up something else. People. Lots of people all clustered together, all radiating the kind of excitement that usually meant trouble. "Looks like our next stop," he said, pointing toward the island. "Please tell me it's a normal island with normal people doing normal things," Usopp pleaded. Luffy's grin turned sharp. "Where's the fun in that?" Behind them, Laboon's song faded into the distance, but the promise remained. Luffy was going to come back. He was going to see the whole world, collect his crew, find the One Piece, and become the Pirate King. And now he had something to help him do it. Something that whispered of ancient powers and inherited will and the weight of dreams that stretched back 800 years. The grand line spread out before them, vast and dangerous and full of possibilities. But for the first time since that lightning struck in Logtown, Luffy felt like he might actually be ready for whatever it threw at him. Bring it on. The first thing that hit Luffy when they approached Whiskey Peak wasn't the sight of the cactus-shaped mountains or the cheerful crowd gathering at the docks. It was the smell, fear, sweat, the metallic tang of hidden weapons and the sour stench of lies told so often they'd started to rot. His new senses picked it all up before they were even within shouting distance of the shore, and the system's warnings started popping up like angry wasps. Warning, hostile intent detected, multiple targets identified, threat assessment. High deception, moderate combat ability, recommended action. Tactical approach, Luffy blinked at the floating windows, then looked back at the crowd of people waving and cheering their arrival. To anyone else, it would have looked like the friendliest welcome in the world. But underneath all the smiles and party preparations, his enhanced senses were screaming danger. "Look at that!" Usopp pointed excitedly at the welcoming committee. "They're throwing us a party already. I knew my reputation as the great Captain Usopp had spread to." "Something's wrong," Luffy said quietly, his hand drifting unconsciously toward the straw hat on his head. Nami raised an eyebrow. "Wrong how? They seem nice enough." How could he explain that he could smell deception like smoke on the wind, that every smile in that crowd felt forced, every cheer calculated? The system was practically vibrating with warnings, painting threat assessments over half the people on the dock. Enemy analysis active, names and threat levels appeared overheads like floating name tags at the world's deadliest convention. Mr. 8, Miss Monday, Mr. 9, all of them radiating the kind of controlled violence that came from professional training. "They're bounty hunters," Luffy said, his voice carrying across the deck. "All of them?" Zoro's hand moved to his swords. "You sure about that?" Luffy nodded, watching more data stream across his vision. Really sure, the big guy with the curly hair, he's got at least 4 weapons I can detect, the nun. She's not a nun, and that guy playing the saxophone, he paused, tilting his head. Actually, he might just really like jazz, but he's also armed. How can you possibly know all that? Sanji lit a cigarette, studying their captain's face. Good question, how could he know? The system was feeding him information faster than he could process it, turning his brain into some kind of tactical computer. It felt weird, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. But it was also useful, I can just tell, he said finally. Trust me. The crew exchanged glances. They'd been sailing together long enough to know that when Luffy got that particular tone in his voice, it usually meant someone was about to get punched through a wall. So what's the plan? Zoro asked, his grip tightening on Wado Ichimonji's hilt. Luffy grinned, but there was something different about it this time, something sharper. We play along. For now, tactical decision approved, stealth approach selected, gathering intelligence. The party was everything you'd expect from a town of bounty hunters trying to drug a crew of pirates. Lots of food, lots of drink, lots of increasingly desperate attempts to get them all blackout drunk. Luffy played his part perfectly, stuffing his face and acting like the simple-minded glutton everyone expected him to be. But behind his cheerful exterior, the system was working overtime. Toxin detected in food, mild sedative alcohol content, 15% above normal surveillance, 23 hostile observers combat readiness. 67% and rising, every bite of food came with a helpful analysis of exactly what kind of knockout drugs they were trying to slip him. Every drink got a complete chemical breakdown. It was like having a paranoid scientist living in his head, and honestly, Luffy wasn't sure he liked it. This was supposed to be fun. Parties were supposed to be fun. But knowing that everyone around him was planning to slit his throat the moment he passed out kind of took the joy out of the whole thing. You're not eating much, Miss Wednesday observed, sliding up next to him with a plate of suspiciously delicious-looking meat. Don't you like our local cuisine? Luffy looked at her, really looked. The system painted her threat assessment in soft blue text: combat ability, low, deception skills, high, hidden agenda, critical. But underneath all the data, his enhanced senses picked up something else. She was scared. Genuinely bone-deep terrified and trying desperately to hide it behind false cheer and careful smiles. It's great, he said, accepting the plate. But I'm pacing myself. Big appetite, you know, she laughed, but it sounded hollow. Of course, the great Monkey D. Luffy with a bounty of 30 million berries. We're so honored to have such a famous pirate visit our humble town. Lie detected, stress indicators, elevated heart rate, micro tremors assessment. Subject is being COERCED, interesting. Miss Wednesday wasn't just a bounty hunter playing a part. She was trapped in this just as much as his crew was. What's your real name? He asked quietly, leaning closer so the others couldn't hear. Her eyes went wide. What do you mean? I'm Miss Wednesday, of course. No, you're not. Luffy's voice was gentle but certain. You're someone else, aren't you? Someone who doesn't want to be here. For just a moment, her mask slipped. Fear and desperation flickered across her face before she slammed the false smile back into place. I don't know what you're talking about. Quest trigger detected, hidden storyline available, accept additional complexity. Before Luffy could decide whether to dig deeper, the sound of snoring filled the party square. One by one, his crew was succumbing to the drugged food and drink. Nami slumped over her plate, Usopp toppled backward off his chair, and even Sanji's cigarette drooped from his lips as he swayed dangerously. Only Zoro remained upright, and that was because the stubborn bastard had been suspicious from the start and stuck to plain water. Well, Mr. 8 stepped forward, his friendly facade melting away like ice in summer. Looks like our guests are ready for the main event. Weapons appeared from nowhere. Dozens of bounty hunters emerged from the shadows, all of them grinning like sharks who just smelled blood in the water. The party atmosphere evaporated, replaced by the cold anticipation of violence. Sorry, Straw Hat, Mr. 8 continued, drawing a saxophone that was definitely not just a musical instrument. Nothing personal. But 30 million berries is 30 million berries. Combat initiated multiple hostile targets, 47 recommended strategy, overwhelming force, Shadow Marine available for summoning. Luffy stood up slowly, brushing crumbs off his vest. The system's combat analysis was painting targeting data over every enemy in sight, calculating optimal attack patterns, and predicting their movements before they even made them. It was like seeing the future. And honestly, it was kind of terrifying. "You know," he said conversationally, "I really wanted to like you guys. The party was nice, the food was good, and some of you seem like decent people who just made bad choices." Mr. 8 raised his saxophone bazooka. "Save the speech, kid. You'll be unconscious in about 30 seconds. "Probably not," Luffy said, and his voice carried a new note, something cold and certain that made several bounty hunters take an involuntary step backward. "See, I've got this new thing, and it's really, really good at helping me deal with people who threaten my friends. Activating enhanced combat protocols, GOMU abilities amplified, Conqueror's HAKI. Partial activation detected, the world slowed down. Not literally, Luffy was still moving at normal speed, but his perception had shifted into something approaching bullet time. He could see every attack coming, track every movement, predict every desperate scramble for cover. Mr. 8 fired his saxophone. The projectile came screaming toward Luffy's head, spinning with enough force to take it clean off. Luffy caught it with his bare hand. The explosion that should have followed never came. Instead, he squeezed gently and the cannonball crumpled like paper. Metal fragments tinkled to the ground around his feet. "My turn," he said. GOMU no GATLING system enhanced. His fists became a blur of motion, each punch guided by the system's tactical analysis. Not random flailing, every strike was precisely calculated to disable without killing, to overwhelm without permanently maiming. Bounty hunters went flying in all directions, their weapons shattering against rubber limbs that moved faster than the eye could follow. It was over in less than a minute. 47 professional bounty hunters, reduced to groaning heaps scattered across the town square. Some of them were still conscious, staring at Luffy with expressions of pure disbelief. Combat complete, experience GAINED. Significant Shadow Marine slots. 3 available, select defeated enemies to preserve as allies. Luffy looked around at the carnage, his enhanced senses picking up pain and fear and the bitter taste of shattered pride. Some of these people had families. Some of them were just trying to make a living in a world that didn't offer many options for people without noble blood or devil fruit powers. "I don't want to turn you into shadows," he said to the floating system interface. "That feels wrong." Alternative suggestion, recruit willing allies, some subjects show potential for loyalty conversion. "Better," he murmured, then raised his voice. "Anyone who wants to keep trying to kill me, speak up now, I'll wait." Silence. Even the crickets seemed to have decided this wasn't the time for chirping. "Good, anyone who wants to explain what the hell is going on here, I'm all ears." Miss Wednesday, or whatever her real name was, stepped forward shakily. Her mask was completely gone now, replaced by exhaustion and something that might have been hope. "My name is Nefer Tari Vivi," she said. "I'm the Princess of Alabasta Kingdom. And I need your help." Major quest available. Liberate Alabasta Kingdom. Estimated duration. Extended ultimate reward. Kingdom's Blessing. Massive EXP. Unique abilities. Warning. High difficulty. Multiple elite opponents except quest. Luffy looked at the princess. Because that's what she was, he could see it now in the way she held herself despite the fear, and felt something click into place in his chest. This was why the system had awakened, not just to make him stronger, but to help him help people who couldn't help themselves. "What kind of help?" he asked. "There's a criminal organization called Baroque Works," Vivi said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "They're trying to destroy my kingdom from the inside, turn the people against the royal family, start a civil war that will tear Alabasta apart. Their leader calls himself Mr. Zero, but I know his real identity." She paused, looking around at the defeated bounty hunters who were all part of the organization she was describing. "It's Sir Crocodile, one of the 7 warlords of the sea." Enemy identified, SIR Crocodile threat level, extremely high special notation, possible system corruption detected, recommended preparation, extensive. Luffy whistled low. A warlord? That was serious business, even for someone with a mysterious power system backing him up. "And you want us to help you stop him," he said. "I know it's asking a lot," Vivi said quickly. "I know you barely know me and this isn't your fight, but we'll do it." Zoro, who had been quietly cleaning his swords throughout the entire battle, looked up sharply. "Luffy, shouldn't we discuss?" "Nope." Luffy's grin was back, but it had a sharp edge to it now. "She asked for help, we help, that's what we do." Quest accepted, long-term objective added to system, preparing extended mission protocols. New ability unlocked. Conqueror's Insight, the last notification hit him like a physical shock. Suddenly, he could see more than just threat assessments and combat data. He could see intentions, motivations, the complex web of loyalties and fears that drove people's actions. Vivi's desperate hope, Zoro's concerned loyalty. the beaten bounty hunter's mixture of fear, respect, and grudging admiration. Even the sleeping forms of his crew radiated trust in his decisions, despite not being conscious to make them. It was overwhelming. All those emotions, all those hidden thoughts and feelings, layered on top of each other like a symphony only he could hear. "You okay?" Zoro asked, studying Luffy's face. "You look like someone just hit you with a brick." "I'm fine," Luffy said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Just processing." Warning: Conqueror's insight is mentally taxing. Recommend gradual usage increase. Excessive use may result in sensory overload. Great. Another power with built-in downsides. But as Luffy looked around at the scene, injured bounty hunters, a desperate princess, his unconscious crew, and the lingering taste of deception in the air, he realized something important. The system wasn't just making him stronger, it was making him responsible. Every new ability came with the weight of knowing more, seeing more, understanding more about the suffering around him. And somehow, that felt right. If he was going to be the Pirate King, if he was going to sail the seas and protect the people he cared about, then he needed to see the world as it really was. Not just the adventure and excitement, but the pain and injustice and all the ways that power got twisted into something ugly. "All right, princess," he said, offering Vivi his hand. "Tell me everything, and I mean everything. If we're going to take down a warlord, I want to know exactly what we're walking into." As she began to explain the intricate conspiracy that threatened to destroy her kingdom, Luffy felt the system settling deeper into his consciousness. More than just a power-up system now, it was becoming part of how he saw the world. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what Joy Boy had intended all along. System evolution. 5% new capabilities integrated, preparing for extended campaign. Next destination. Little Garden, estimated difficulty. Moderate to high, special conditions may apply. The grand line stretched out before them, vast and dangerous and full of possibilities. But now Luffy had something more than just dreams and determination driving him forward. He had purpose, and the tools to make that purpose reality. Bring on the warlord, the dinosaur came out of nowhere. One moment Luffy was helping Sanji gather supplies from the dense jungle of Little Garden. And the next moment, a T-Rex the size of a house was bearing down on them with teeth like ivory daggers and breath that smelled like a fish market in summer. Most people would have panicked. Most people would have run screaming, but Luffy just grinned and cracked his knuckles. Finally, something fun, dinosaur species, TYRANNOSAURUS Rex, threat level, moderate estimated combat duration. 12 seconds, special condition. Island energy detected, warning, environmental anomaly in progress. The system's warnings were getting more frequent lately and more cryptic. What was an environmental anomaly? And why did the air around Little Garden feel thick, like it was charged with electricity before a storm, but heavier, more ancient? The T-Rex lunged, jaws snapping shut where Luffy's head had been a split second before. He'd already stretched himself out of the way, rubber limbs carrying him up into the canopy, while Sanji took the opportunity to plant a devastating kick in the creature's ribs. Diable jambe! The cook's leg blazed with heat as it connected, and the dinosaur staggered sideways with a roar of pain and confusion. But something was wrong. The T-Rex should have gone down. Sanji's kicks could crack steel when he put his mind to it. Instead, the massive predator shook its head and came back for more, its hide seeming to shimmer with an odd, translucent quality. Anomaly confirmed. Creatures enhanced by unknown energy source. Dungeon formation detected. Island status. Transforming dungeon formation? What the hell did that mean? Before Luffy could ask the system for clarification, the ground beneath them began to glow. Not with fire or electricity, but with something that looked like liquid starlight, veins of silver blue energy that spread out from some central point deeper in the jungle. The T-Rex roared again, but this time the sound was different, deeper, more resonant. And when Luffy looked at it with his enhanced senses, he could see threads of that same energy wrapping around its body like armor. "This is new," he muttered, then louder. "Sanji, I think the island's doing something weird." "You think?" The blonde chef dodged another snap of those massive jaws, his movements precise and deadly. "Anytime you want to share what your magic system is telling you would be great, right?" His crew still couldn't see the system interface, which meant they were operating blind while he had access to a tactical computer that was apparently having a nervous breakdown. Dungeon formation, 23% complete, estimated time to full activation, 4 minutes 17 seconds, recommended action. Locate dungeon core, warning, Guardians awakening Guardians. Luffy's blood ran cold as his enhanced hearing picked up something from deeper in the jungle. Footsteps. Huge footsteps, shaking the ground with each impact. and voices, deep, booming voices that carried the weight of years and stories and battles fought with honor. "Gahha, did you hear that, Brogy? Something's disturbed the old magic." "Gabba, indeed I did, Dory. Shall we investigate?" Giants. The legendary warriors of Elbaf that every kid in the East Blue had heard stories about. Dory the Blue Ogre and Brogy the Red Ogre, locked in eternal combat on this prehistoric island. Except now, apparently, they were dungeon guardians. Dory the Blue Ogre status, Dungeon Guardian awakened combat ability. Extremely high special condition. Will test strength and honor. Brogy the Red Ogre status, Dungeon Guardian awakened combat ability. Extremely high special condition. Will test courage and friendship. Tests, Luffy said aloud, dodging another dinosaur bite while his brain tried to process what the system was telling him. It's not just a fight. They're going to test us. Test us for what? Sanji landed a perfectly timed axe kick that finally sent the T-Rex crashing to the ground, where it dissolved into motes of silver light that got absorbed back into the glowing veins running through the earth. "I have no idea," Luffy admitted, "but I think we're about to find out." The jungle exploded, not with fire or explosions, but with the arrival of two figures so massive they made the T-Rex look like a house cat. Dory and Brogy emerged from the thick vegetation like walking mountains, their weapons gleaming with the same energy that was transforming the island around them. Up close, they were even more impressive than the stories suggested. Dory stood nearly 90 feet tall, his blue skin marked with ritual scars and his beard braided with bones from creatures Luffy couldn't identify. Brogy was slightly smaller but broader, his red hair wild and his axe crackling with power that made the air itself hum. And they were both grinning. "Gahha, look Brogy, we have visitors. Gabba, and young ones at that. Tell me, little pirates, do you know why you're here?" Luffy stepped forward, ignoring Sanji's hiss of warning. His crew was scattered across the island. Nami and Usopp were with Dory's camp. Zoro was probably lost somewhere in the jungle. And VV was back on the ship with the still unconscious members from Whiskey Peak. If this went bad, if he couldn't figure out what these giants wanted, people were going to get hurt. "Not really," he said honestly. "But I'm guessing it has something to do with whatever's happening to your island." Dory's massive eyes focused on him, and Luffy felt the weight of that ancient gaze like a physical thing. "Gahha, honest, I like that. Tell me, Straw Hat Luffy, for we know who you are. What do you know of the old ways?" "The old ways, Gabba, Brogy's laugh shook the trees. "The ways of honor, of friendship. Of proving yourself worthy of the power you've been given." Quest triggered, Trial of the Giants objective. Prove worthy of inherited power, Test 1. Strength, defeat a guardian in single combat, Test 2. Honor, show respect for warrior tradition, Test 3. Friendship, demonstrate unbreakable bonds, reward. Giants MIGHT ability, ancient weapon fragment, shadow marine enhancement, failure condition. Permanent loss of system access, Luffy's blood turned to ice. Permanent loss of system access, they could take away his power. "I can see the fear in your eyes, young one," Dory said, his voice gentler now. "Gahha, good. Fear means you understand the stakes. The power you carry is not yours by right, it is yours by worthiness, and worthiness must be proven again and again or it becomes corruption." "The island knows," Brogy added, gesturing to the silver veins of energy that were now pulsing like a heartbeat through the ground. "It has been sleeping for 800 years, waiting for one who carries the true inheritance. But inheritance without proof is just theft." Luffy looked around at the transformed jungle, at the two legendary warriors who had somehow become the arbiters of his right to carry Joy Boy's legacy. The system was offering him incredible rewards, but threatening to take away everything if he failed. "What if I say no?" he asked. "What if I don't want to be tested?" Both giants went very still. Even the jungle seemed to hold its breath. "Gahha, Dory said finally, but there was no humor in it now. "Then you prove yourself unworthy and the power finds another." "Gabba, Brogy agreed. "And your friends pay the price for your cowardice." As if summoned by his words, screams echoed from deeper in the jungle. Familiar screams, Nami's voice high and terrified, Usopp shouting something about giant spiders. "Crew members in danger, dungeon creatures scaling to challenge level time limit. Accept trial or face escalating THRATS. That's not fair," Luffy said, his hands clenching into fists. "They're not part of this. They don't have anything to do with whatever power I inherited." "Gahha, but they chose to follow you," Dory pointed out. "They chose to tie their fate to yours. That makes them part of your worthiness, whether you like it or not." "A captain protects his crew," Brogy said. "But how can you protect them if you're not worthy of the strength needed to do so?" More screams, closer now. And through his enhanced senses, Luffy could feel his friend's terror, their confusion, their desperate need for him to do something. He thought about Laboon singing his lonely song at Reverse Mountain, about Vivi risking everything to save her kingdom, about all the promises he'd made, all the dreams he'd sworn to protect. The system had awakened in him for a reason, not just to make him stronger, but to make him better, to give him the tools he needed to keep those promises, to protect those dreams, but only if he was worthy. "Fine," he said, stepping forward. "I accept your trial. Trial of the Giants. Accepted. Dungeon lockdown initiated. No one leaves until trial is complete. Test 1. Strength. Begin." The world around them shifted, reality bending like heated glass. The jungle faded, replaced by a vast arena carved from living stone. Pillars of silver light rose from the ground, and in the center, a circle of sand marked the boundary of combat. "GHHA, the first test," Dory announced, stepping into the arena with his massive sword. "You must defeat one of us in single combat. Not kill, we are already ghosts, echoes of warriors long dead, but defeat. Prove that your strength is more than just power, but will made manifest." Luffy walked to the center of the circle, his mind racing. Dory was huge, experienced, and enhanced by whatever energy was running this dungeon. But the system was already feeding him tactical data, analyzing movement patterns and identifying weak points. Enemy analysis. DORRY, the Blue Ogre, strength, 98/100 speed, 34/100 technique, 87/100 weakness, overconfidence, predictable attack patterns, recommended strategy, speed and precision. Dory raised his sword, a blade longer than the Mary's mainmast. "GHHA, come then, Inheritor. Show me the strength of your will." He brought the sword down in an overhead strike that would have split Luffy in half. But Luffy wasn't there anymore. He'd stretched himself aside at the last second, rubber limbs carrying him around behind the giant's massive form. "Gomu Gomu no," he coiled his arm back, storing kinetic energy like a spring. "Pistol." His fist slammed into the back of Dory's knee, and the giant actually staggered. Not much, just a half step forward, but enough to show that Luffy could hurt him. "GHHA, good, but not nearly enough." Dory spun faster than something that size had any right to move, his sword whistling through the air in a horizontal arc that forced Luffy to drop flat against the sand. The blade passed inches over his head, close enough to trim his hair. Combat analysis. Opponent adapting, speed increasing, recommend escalation. This wasn't working. Dory was too big, too experienced, and he was getting faster as the fight went on. Luffy needed something more than just his basic rubber techniques. He needed to trust the system. "Gear second," he whispered. Heat flooded his body as his blood pressure spiked and his heart began pumping at superhuman speeds. Steam rose from his skin, and suddenly the world seemed to slow down around him. Dory's movements, which had been lightning fast for something his size, became readable, predictable. "Gear second, activated system enhancement. Plus 200% speed, plus 150% power. Warning, increased stamina drain." Luffy vanished. Not literally, he was still there, still solid, but he was moving so fast that even Dory's enhanced perception couldn't track him. He bounced off the arena walls, the pillars, even the giant's own body, building momentum and speed until he was just a pink blur ricocheting around the combat zone. "Gomu Gomu no." His voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Jet Gatling." The barrage hit Dory from 12 different angles simultaneously, each punch enhanced by the system's tactical analysis and delivered with the precision of a surgical strike. Not random violence, but calculated impacts designed to overwhelm the giant's defenses without causing permanent damage. Dory went down. The legendary warrior of Elbaf, the Blue Ogre who had fought for 100 years without defeat, hit the sand with a crash that shook the arena. For a moment he just lay there, breathing hard and staring up at the ceiling. Then he started to laugh. "GHHA, GHHHHHA." The sound filled the arena, rich with joy and something that might have been relief. "Magnificent. Truly magnificent. You fight not just with strength but with purpose, with the will to protect rather than destroy." Test 1. Complete strength proven. Giants respect EARNED. Dory picked himself up, no longer enhanced by dungeon energy but still smiling. "GAHHA, I have not been defeated so thoroughly in 200 years. You are worthy of the first trial, Monkey D. Luffy." But even as relief flooded through him, Luffy could hear his friends' voices echoing from somewhere beyond the arena. Still in danger, still depending on him. "The next test," he said urgently. "What's the next test?" "GABABABA." Brogy stepped forward, his axe gleaming with renewed power. "Honor, young Inheritor. You must show that you understand what it means to be a warrior. what it means to fight for something greater than yourself. The arena shifted again, and suddenly they were no longer alone. Ghostly figures filled the stands, warriors from Elbaf, their faces solemn and expectant. And in the center of the combat circle, a new challenge waited. Usopp, chained to a pillar, unconscious but breathing. And standing over him, a shadow version of Luffy himself, grinning with malicious intent. Test 2. Honor, defeat your shadow without harming your friend. Warning. Shadow possesses all your abilities. Additional warning. Shadow feels no restraint. The Shadow Luffy looked up at him with eyes like black holes. Hey there, original. Ready to see what you'd be like without all that pesky morality holding you back. This was going to be hard. The shadow version of himself was everything Luffy feared he could become. It moved with his speed, hit with his strength, used his techniques with ruthless precision, but without the restraint that came from caring about collateral damage. Where Luffy would pull his punches to avoid hurting innocents, Shadow Luffy aimed for maximum destruction. Where Luffy fought to protect, his dark reflection fought to dominate, and it was winning. Gomu Gomu no Bazooka. The Shadow's attack slammed into the pillar where Usopp was chained, cracking the stone and sending debris raining down on his unconscious friend. Luffy threw himself forward, catching the falling rocks with his body while his shadow laughed at the display. See how weakness makes you predictable, it taunted, already preparing another attack. You could end this in seconds if you just stopped caring about collateral damage. Combat analysis. Shadow entity abilities, identical to host limitations, no emotional restraints. Weakness. Unable to adapt beyond host's current capabilities. Recommended strategy. Exploit moral flexibility. Moral flexibility. The system was suggesting he think like his shadow, but that was exactly what this test was designed to prevent, wasn't it? You don't understand honor, Luffy said, dodging another barrage while positioning himself between his shadow and the unconscious Usopp. It's not about being weak, it's about being strong enough to choose how you use your power. Honor is a leash, Shadow Luffy snarled, stretching his arms wide to attack from multiple angles. A way for the weak to control the strong. You could rule this world if you just, I don't want to rule the world. Luffy's voice cut through his shadow's speech, calm and certain. I want to be free. And I want the people I care about to be free too. Insight detected, honor understanding. Developing new combat option available, the system painted a new attack pattern in his vision, not one designed to defeat his shadow through overwhelming force, but through demonstration. Through showing rather than telling what honor actually meant. Luffy stopped dodging. The shadow's next attack hit him square in the chest, sending him flying backward into the arena wall. Pain exploded through his ribs and he tasted blood in his mouth, but he smiled as he picked himself up. What are you doing? Shadow Luffy demanded, confusion replacing the malicious glee in its voice. I'm showing you something, Luffy said, walking forward despite the pain in his chest. I could have dodged that. The system told me exactly how, but if I had, you would have redirected the attack toward Usopp. He took another hit, this one to his shoulder, and kept walking. By taking the damage myself, I control where the fight happens. I protect my friend not by being stronger than you, but by being willing to sacrifice for him. Honor concept. Sacrifice for others, warrior spirit. Acknowledged giant ancestors, approving in the ghostly stands, the spectral warriors of Elbaf nodded in approval. This was what they had wanted to see, not just strength, but the wisdom to use that strength correctly. Shadow Luffy was getting desperate now, its attacks more frantic and less precise. You're being stupid, you could win if you just… Win what? Luffy asked, close enough now to reach out and touch his dark reflection. What exactly would I win if I became like you? If I stopped caring about the people who trust me? His shadow opened its mouth to answer, then stopped. For the first time since the fight began, uncertainty flickered across its features. I'd lose everything that makes me who I am, Luffy continued. My crew wouldn't follow someone who treats them as expendable. VV wouldn't trust someone who doesn't understand sacrifice. And I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror. He placed his hand on the shadow's chest, right over where its heart would be if it had one. That's what honor means. It's not a limitation, it's what separates a king from a tyrant. The shadow stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly it began to smile, not the malicious grin from before, but something that looked almost proud. You know what? It said softly. Maybe you're right. And then it dissolved into motes of silver light that flowed back into Luffy, carrying with them a deeper understanding of what it meant to be strong. Test 2. Complete honor proven, warrior's wisdom EARNED, the chains around Usopp vanished and the sniper stirred awake with a groan. Luffy, what? Where are we? Proving a point, Luffy said, helping his friend to his feet. You okay? I think so. What happened? Last thing I remember, there were these giant spiders and then Usopp's eyes widened as he took in their surroundings. Are those giant ghosts? Gahahah. Dory's laughter filled the arena. Indeed they are, young sniper, the spirits of our ancestors called to witness this trial. Gababa. Brogy nodded approvingly. 2 tests completed with honor and wisdom, but one remains. Test 3. Friendship demonstrate unbreakable bonds. Warning. This test will challenge your DEPSD connections. The arena shifted one final time, but instead of changing location, it simply expanded. Suddenly, all of Luffy's crew was there. Zoro, Nami, Sanji, even Vivi and the others who had been scattered across the island. They looked confused but unharmed, which was a relief. Until the ghostly warriors in the stands began to speak. Your navigator, one of them intoned, pointing at Nami. She serves you for money. When gold calls louder than loyalty, she will betray you. Your swordsman, another added, indicating Zoro. He follows you only until someone stronger appears. His ambition will consume his friendship. Your cook, a third spirit pronounced. He protects women above all else. When forced to choose between you and a lady in distress, he will abandon you. With each accusation, Luffy felt his friend's emotions through his enhanced senses. Hurt, anger. Betrayal that these ancient spirits would reduce their bonds to such simple, selfish motivations. But underneath those surface emotions, he sensed something else. Doubt, the tiny, hidden fears that everyone carried. What if they weren't good enough? What if their friends didn't really care about them? What if, when the worst came, they'd be alone? Friendship test. Emotional resonance detected. Crew bonds under examination. Must prove connection transcends individual fears. They're wrong, Luffy said simply, his voice carrying across the arena. Are they? Brogy asked. How can you be certain? Have you not seen pirates betray each other for less? Have you not witnessed the dissolution of crews when pressure mounted? Luffy looked around at his friends, really looked, with all the perception the system had given him. He saw their fears, yes, but he also saw something deeper, the truth beneath the doubt. Nami's terror when she thought he might be executed in Logtown. The way she'd screamed his name, not caring about the money or the danger, just desperate for him to be safe. Zoro's quiet dedication, the way he'd never once questioned an order or hesitated to put himself in harm's way for the crew. His dream of becoming the world's greatest swordsman, shared freely because he trusted Luffy to help him achieve it. Sanji's gentle hands as he cooked for them, making sure everyone was fed and healthy. His protective instincts that extended to the entire crew, not just women in distress. I'm certain, Luffy said, because I know them. Not the fears they carry or the mistakes they might make, but who they are when everything else is stripped away. He walked over to Nami first, ignoring the ghostly accusations still echoing around them. You didn't join us for money, he told her. You joined us because you were tired of being alone, because you wanted people who would fight for you the way you fight for your village. Nami's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Next was Zoro. You follow me because you trust me to help you become stronger. Not because I'm the strongest person you'll ever meet, but because I understand what it means to chase an impossible dream. The swordsman grunted, which from Zoro was practically a declaration of eternal loyalty. Finally, Sanji, and you protect everyone, not just women. You feed us because that's how you show love. You die before you let any of us go hungry because you remember what it feels like to starve. The cook's cigarette trembled between his lips, but he managed a shaky smile. That's what friendship is, Luffy announced to the ghostly audience. It's not about being perfect or never having doubts. It's about choosing to trust each other anyway, about being willing to fight for each other even when you're scared. Friendship understanding. Complete unbreakable bonds. Confirmed crew loyalty. Absolute, the spectral warriors began to applaud, their ghostly hands creating a sound like wind through leaves. In their ancient faces, Luffy saw approval and something that might have been envy. They had known honor and strength, but perhaps not the kind of loyalty that transcended individual ambition. Gahahah, Dory boomed. Well spoken, young inheritor. You have proven yourself worthy in all things, strength, honor, and the bonds that make strength meaningful. Gababa, Brogy agreed. The trial is complete. Claim your rewards, Trial of the Giants. Completed, all tests passed with distinction, rewards granted. Giant's Might. Can temporarily increase size and strength, ancient weapon fragment. Partial data ON Pluton acquired, Shadow Marine enhancement. Allies can now be preserved and summoned, bonus reward. Conqueror's Legacy. Can inspire absolute loyalty in worthy individuals. The power hit him like a tidal wave, but gentler than before. Instead of the sharp electric sensation of previous upgrades, this felt warm, like being wrapped in a blanket made of starlight. Knowledge flowed into his mind, ancient fighting techniques, fragments of historical data, and most importantly, a deeper understanding of what leadership actually meant. It wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being worthy of the trust people placed in you. The dungeon began to dissolve around them, silver energy flowing back into the earth as Little Garden returned to its natural state. But something had changed, not just in Luffy, but in the island itself. The prehistoric creatures moved with more intelligence now, and the very air seemed to hum with residual power. Gahaha. This island has been blessed by your trial, Dory explained as they prepared to leave. It will remember what happened here, and perhaps one day it will test another who carries the old power. The Imperial Eyes watch, Brogy added ominously. They have felt the awakening since the trials you've passed. Your path grows more dangerous from here, Monkey D. Luffy. Warning, Imperial Attention GAINED threat level. Unknown but significant, recommend increased vigilance, Luffy nodded, filing the warning away for later consideration. Right now, he was just grateful that his crew was safe and that he'd proven worthy of the power growing inside him. As they sailed away from Little Garden, he stood at the bow of the Mary and watched the dinosaur-filled jungle fade into the distance. His friends gathered around him, Nami checking charts, Zoro napping against the mast, Sanji preparing lunch, Usopp spinning increasingly elaborate tales of their adventure. They were stronger now, all of them. The trial hadn't just tested Luffy's worthiness, it had forged his crew into something more unified, more trusting. They'd seen the depths of his commitment to them, and he'd seen theirs in return. Crew cohesion, maximum system evolution, 12% next destination, Drum Island special conditions, medical crisis incoming medical crisis. Luffy frowned at the notification, then looked around at his perfectly healthy crew. What kind of medical crisis could possibly? Nami collapsed. She hit the deck hard, her body burning with fever and her breathing shallow. Vivi rushed to her side, pressing a hand to her forehead and crying out in alarm. She's burning up, something's wrong. Crew member status, critical condition. KESDIA fever tropical disease treatment required. Immediate medical attention, nearest medical facility. Drum Island 2 days sailing warning. Condition fatal without treatment. And just like that, their victory at Little Garden was forgotten in the face of a new crisis. Luffy knelt beside Nami, taking her burning hand in his while the system fed him medical data he desperately wished he didn't need. 2 days to Drum Island, 2 days to find a doctor who could save one of the people he'd just sworn to protect with his life. Sanji, he barked, all speed to the next island. Zoro, help me get her below deck. As they raced across the Grand Line toward an island covered in snow and filled with its own dangers, Luffy felt the weight of leadership settling more heavily on his shoulders. The system had given him power, but power without wisdom was useless. And wisdom, he was learning, often meant making impossible choices under unbearable pressure. But that was what it meant to be captain. That was what it meant to carry the will of Joy Boy and the dreams of everyone who followed him. He'd proven himself worthy in the trials of Little Garden. Now came the real test, keeping his promises when the world seemed determined to break them. The snow-covered peaks of Drum Island appeared on the horizon, and Luffy gritted his teeth against what was coming. Time to save his navigator. Nami was dying. Luffy didn't need the system's constant medical updates to know that. He could see it in the way her skin had turned a sickly gray, feel it in the way her breathing hitched and stuttered with each labored breath. But the floating blue screens kept feeding him information anyway, a steady stream of medical data that made his chest tight with helpless rage. Kestia fever, stage 3 progression body temperature. 104.2 degrees F, estimated time to organ failure. 6 HOURS 23 minutes, treatment window closing 6 hours. They'd been sailing toward Drum Island for 2 days straight, pushing the Mary harder than she'd ever been pushed, and they still had 6 hours left before they reached the island's shores. 6 hours before they could find a doctor who might be able to save her. The math was brutal and simple. Nami would be dead before they reached help. There has to be something we can do, Vivi said for the 20th time, wringing out another cold cloth to place on Nami's forehead. Some way to slow the fever, buy us more time. Sanji paced the small sick bay like a caged animal, his cigarette burned down to nothing between his lips. I've tried every remedy I know. Cool baths, herbal teas, even that weird mushroom soup recipe my old man taught me. Nothing's working. Luffy stared down at his navigator, his enhanced senses picking up every detail of her suffering. The system kept offering medical advice: reduce fever with cold compresses, maintain hydration, monitor for seizures, but it was all stopgap measures, buying time they didn't have for treatment that was still hours away. Unless. The system, he said suddenly, making everyone in the room look at him. It's been giving me medical information this whole time. What if it can do more than just diagnose? Medical intervention protocols available. Warning. Untested abilities, risk of complications. Moderate to high, recommend seeking trained medical professional. What kind of intervention? He asked the floating screen, ignoring his crew's confused stares. Emergency medical package unlocked, basic field medicine. Available, enhanced healing. Requires energy expenditure, temporary symptom suppression. Possible warning, these are stopgap measures, only stopgap measures. But stopgap measures that might keep Nami alive until they could reach proper medical care. It wasn't a cure, but it was something. Luffy, Zoro's voice cut through his thoughts, low and serious. Whatever you're thinking, you better be sure about it if you make her worse. I won't, Luffy said, with more confidence than he felt. I can't cure her, but I might be able to slow things down. Keep her stable until we reach Drum Island. He placed his hands on Nami's burning forehead, feeling the fever radiating through her skin like heat from a furnace. The system guided him, showing him pressure points and energy flows that he somehow knew how to manipulate despite never having any medical training. Activating emergency healing protocols, channeling system energy through physical contact. Warning. Severe stamina drain incoming, power flowed out of him, not the explosive strength he used in combat, but something gentler, more focused. It felt like he was pouring part of himself into Nami, sharing his vitality to bolster her failing systems. The effect was immediate. Her breathing eased, becoming deeper and more regular. The deadly gray pallor faded from her skin, replaced by something closer to natural color. Her fever didn't break, but it stopped climbing, stabilizing at a level that was dangerous but not immediately fatal. Temporary stabilization achieved, patient status. Critical but stable, effect duration. 8-10 HOURS, energy cost. Severe fatigue, the room spun around Luffy as the healing finished, exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. He would have collapsed if Sanji hadn't caught his arm, steadying him with a grip that was probably leaving bruises. You okay, Captain? Fine, Luffy lied, though his legs felt like rubber and not in the fun way. Just tired. But Nami should be stable now. We've got maybe 8 hours instead of 6. It wasn't much of an improvement, but sometimes a few extra hours made all the difference in the world. They reached Drum Island as the sun was setting, its snow-covered peaks glowing pink and gold in the dying light. The island looked exactly like what Luffy had always imagined the North Pole would be: endless white snow, pine forests dark with winter, and a massive castle perched on top of the highest mountain like something out of a fairy tale. Drum Island analysis: climate, perpetual winter, population, scattered, mostly rural medical facilities, concentrated AT Castle summit, political status, recently destabilized, warning. Hostile wildlife and weather conditions. The docks were nearly deserted, just a few hardy souls bundled up in thick coats who watched their approach with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Luffy could sense their emotions through his enhanced perception, fear, mostly, mixed with a kind of weary resignation that spoke of recent hardship. Excuse me, VV called to the dock workers as they tied off the Mary. We need a doctor, our friend is very sick. The response was immediate and heartbreaking. Every person on the dock took a step backward, their faces closing off like shutters being slammed shut. No doctors here, one of them said, his voice flat and final. Not anymore. What do you mean, no doctors? Sanji stepped forward, his usual charm replaced by barely controlled desperation. This is a medical island, isn't it? There have to be doctors somewhere. Used to be, an old woman said, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders, before King Wapol exiled them all. Now there's just the witch up in the castle, and she don't see nobody. Political situation analysis: King Wapol exiled all DOCTORS except Dr. KUREHA, skilled but reclusive population. Medically UNDERSERVED, recent events. WAPOL's temporary absence. Luffy felt something cold settle in his stomach that had nothing to do with the winter air. All the doctors exiled. What kind of king would leave his people without medical care? The witch in the castle, he said, ignoring the system's political analysis for now. How do we reach her? You don't, the old woman said firmly. Mountains too dangerous, especially in winter. Lapons tear you apart before you're halfway up, and even if you make it past them, the witch don't take visitors. Lapons, aggressive rabbit-like creatures, threat level, moderate in GROUPS territorial behavior. Highly aggressive to intruders. Luffy looked up at the castle perched impossibly high above them, then back at the Mary where Nami lay unconscious in the sick bay. 8 hours, maybe less. And their only hope was a reclusive doctor who lived at the top of a mountain guarded by attack rabbits. "Then we climb," he said simply. "Luffy," Zoro's voice carried a warning. "In this weather with Nami unconscious, it'll be, we climb," Luffy repeated, his voice carrying the tone that meant the discussion was over. "I'm not letting her die because some mountain is inconvenient." The ascent was a nightmare. The snow was knee-deep and still falling, the wind cut through their clothes like icy knives, and the Lapons appeared exactly when the system had predicted they would. Massive white rabbits with claws like razors and attitudes that made Arlong look friendly. But Luffy was beyond caring about convenience or comfort. Every step up the mountain was a step closer to saving Nami, and he'd walk through hell itself if that's what it took. Environmental hazards, severe, crew stamina. Declining rapidly, patient status. Condition deteriorating, recommendation. Find shelter. They found shelter in the form of a small house halfway up the mountain, smoke curling from its chimney like a promise of warmth. Luffy kicked the door open without bothering to knock, his arms wrapped around Nami's unconscious form while the rest of his crew stumbled in behind him. "Hey!" a young voice protested from somewhere near the fireplace. "You can't just," the voice cut off as its owner got a good look at them. Luffy found himself staring at something that might have been the strangest sight in a life already full of strange sights. A small reindeer wearing a pink hat, standing upright like a person, with a blue nose that was somehow expressive enough to convey shock, fear, and curiosity all at once. Species: reindeer enhanced devil fruit. Ichitoh no MI detected medical knowledge. Extensive emotional state. Conflicted designation. Potential ally, you're a doctor, Luffy said, and it wasn't a question. The reindeer chopper, according to the name tag floating above his head, took a step backward. I'm not. I can't. But his eyes were already fixed on Nami, and Luffy could see the moment when medical training overrode social anxiety. Chopper's entire demeanor changed, shifting from nervous to professional in the space of a heartbeat. Kestia fever, the reindeer said, moving forward to check Nami's pulse. Advanced stage, but someone's been treating her. The stabilization work is, actually pretty good. Whoever did this bought you several hours. That was me, Luffy said, settling Nami gently on the couch near the fire. Chopper looked up at him with something like awe. You're not a doctor. I can tell, but this healing work. It's like you knew exactly which pressure points to target, exactly how much energy to channel. How? Medical knowledge synchronization detected. Subject has natural affinity for healing ARTS recommendation. Establish learning partnership. I had help, Luffy said honestly. But right now, I don't care how it happened. Can you save her? Chopper was already moving, pulling medical supplies from cabinets and drawers with the efficiency of long practice. Yes, but I'll need to prepare a specific antidote. The treatment will take several hours and she'll need constant monitoring. Then do it. But I'm not supposed to treat humans, Chopper said, his hands already working despite his words. Dr. Hiraluk always said I should help anyone who needs it, but the people in the village, they don't trust me. They think I'm a monster. Emotional resonance detected, subject's core motivation, desire to help others, conflict. Social rejection Vs. Medical duty, inherited will pattern recognized. Luffy felt something click in his chest, a recognition that went deeper than just the system's analysis. This little reindeer doctor reminded him of something, or someone. The way he talked about helping people despite rejection, the way his dedication to healing overrode his fear. Dr. Hiraluk, Luffy said. Tell me about him. Chopper's hands stilled for a moment, and when he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. He was the greatest doctor who ever lived. He taught me that there's no disease that can't be cured, no person who doesn't deserve help. He died trying to save this island's heart. Historical data accessed, Dr. Hiriluk, quack doctor with noble intentions, core belief. Inherited will of healing, death. Sacrifice for greater good, pattern match. Joy Boy's philosophy detected. The system was practically humming with recognition now, painting connections between Hiraluk's beliefs and the ancient will that Luffy carried. This wasn't coincidence. Somehow, this little reindeer and his adoptive father were part of the same legacy of inherited dreams and impossible promises. He sounds like someone I would have liked, Luffy said softly. Chopper smiled through his tears and went back to preparing Nami's treatment. But before he could finish, the house shook as something massive landed on the roof. Snow cascaded from the ceiling, and through the windows, Luffy could see the outline of something that looked like a mechanical hippopotamus. Threat detected. Baku Baku no Mi user King Wapol returned to Drum Island threat level, moderate to high special ability. Can consume and integrate matter warning. Highly unstable personality, the door exploded inward, and King Wapol stepped through the wreckage like he owned the world. He was exactly what Luffy had expected from a king who would exile all the doctors from a medical island, fat, arrogant, and radiating the kind of petty cruelty that came from having power without wisdom. Well, Wapol said, his tin-plated jaw clicking as he spoke. What do we have here? Pirates, in my kingdom, and, his eyes fixed on Chopper with undisguised malice. The monster reindeer. I thought I told you to stay away from humans. Enemy analysis. King Wapol combat ability, moderate devil fruit. Baku Baku no Mi can eat anything weakness, overconfidence, poor tactical thinking, corruption level. Significant system fragment, detected and degraded weight. System fragment, Wapol had part of a system like his own. Confirmed, subject possesses corrupted system remnant origin, stolen from previous user functionality. Limited to consumption abilities, mental degradation. Severe, that explained a lot. Wapol wasn't just naturally cruel, he had a piece of power that was eating him alive from the inside, turning whatever human decency he might have once had into raw, destructive hunger. Get away from my patient, Chopper said, stepping between Wapol and Nami with a courage that made Luffy's chest swell with pride. Your patient, Wapol laughed, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. You're not a doctor, monster. You're barely even an animal, and these pirates, well, they're about to become my lunch. Wapol's jaw unhinged like a snake's, revealing rows of metal teeth that could apparently chew through anything. The corrupted system fragment was feeding him tactical data, but it was incomplete, damaged. He thought he was invincible. He was about to learn otherwise. Sanji, Zoro, Luffy said quietly, not taking his eyes off Wapol. Get everyone to safety. This won't take long. Luffy, Sanji started to protest. Go. The tone brooked no argument. This is between me and the Tin Man. Initiating combat protocols, System V's system conflict detected, pure inheritance V's corrupted fragment, victory will purify stolen power, Wapol lunged, his mechanical jaw snapping shut where Luffy's head had been a fraction of a second before. But Luffy wasn't there anymore. He was above, behind, moving with the enhanced speed and perception that his complete system provided. Gomu no. He coiled his arms back, storing kinetic energy. Bazooka, the attack sent Wapol flying through the wall and out into the snow, where he rolled to a stop in a drift that came up to his metal chin. For a moment, Luffy thought the fight might be over that quickly. Then Wapol stood up and ate the entire snowdrift. Just opened his mouth and consumed it, his body visibly growing larger and more muscular as the corrupted system converted mass into power. Baku Baku Factory, Wapol's voice was distorted now, echoing with mechanical undertones. I'll eat this whole mountain if I have to, starting with your friends. Enemy power increase, significant consumption ability. Converting matter to strength, warning, environmental damage likely. The fight that followed was unlike anything Luffy had experienced before. Wapol didn't just attack, he consumed. Pieces of the mountain, trees, rocks, even the snow itself disappeared into his mechanical maw, each bite making him larger and stronger. But the corrupted system was also making him more unstable. Luffy could see it in the way Wapol's movements became increasingly erratic, in the way his eyes took on a manic gleam that spoke of intelligence fragmenting under pressure. This wasn't a sustainable power. It was burning him out from the inside, and all Luffy had to do was survive until the corruption consumed itself. Tactical analysis. Enemy system overloading. Recommend defensive strategy. Corruption will reach critical mass in 3 minutes 47 seconds. But 3 minutes was a long time when facing an opponent who kept getting bigger and hungrier with each passing second. Wapol had eaten half the forest by now, his body swollen to the size of a small building, and he showed no signs of slowing down. Time for a different approach. You know what your problem is, Luffy called out, dodging another snap of those massive jaws. You don't understand what power is really for. Power is for taking what you want, Wapol roared back, his voice now deep enough to shake the mountains. For making others serve you. For protecting people, Luffy interrupted, activating gear second in a burst of steam and speed. For keeping promises, for making sure the people who trust you never have to be afraid. He was moving faster than Wapol could track now, bouncing off trees and rocks and the Tyrant King's own massive body, building momentum for one final attack. That's what Dr. Hiraluk understood, Luffy continued, his voice carrying across the mountainside. That's what Chopper understands. Power without compassion isn't strength, it's just hunger. System synchronization, maximum inherited will. Active purification protocol. Ready, Gomu no. Luffy stretched his arm back impossibly far, storing more kinetic energy than he'd ever channeled before. King Kong gun! The punch hit Wapol with the force of a cannonball, but more than that, it carried the weight of Luffy's complete system. Pure, uncorrupted power that burned away the stolen fragments like sunlight dispelling shadows. Wapol shrieked as the corruption was torn out of him, his swollen body deflating like a punctured balloon. The stolen system fragments dissolved into motes of silver light that flowed back toward their rightful place in the cosmic order, leaving behind nothing but a confused, broken man lying in the snow. Corrupted system purified, stolen fragments restored to cycle experience GAINED. Massive, new ability unlocked. Medical mastery, crew synchronization, available Kingdom's blessing. EARNED, the power that flowed into Luffy this time was different from before, gentler, more focused on healing and protection than raw combat ability. He could feel medical knowledge integrating with his consciousness, understanding of anatomy and disease and treatment that would let him help his crew in ways he'd never imagined. But more than that, he could feel the connections between himself and his friends strengthening, becoming something that transcended individual limitations. When the time came, he would be able to share his abilities with them, let them fight with his strength and see with his perception. They were becoming something more than just a crew. They were becoming a family in the truest sense, bound together by bonds that went deeper than blood. Is it over? Chopper's voice was small and uncertain as he emerged from the ruined house, medical bag still clutched in his hooves. It's over, Luffy confirmed, looking down at the unconscious Wapol. He won't be hurting anyone else. And Nami, Luffy's enhanced medical senses could detect his navigator's condition from here, and what he found made him smile. She's going to be fine, the treatment worked. Chopper's face lit up with pure joy, the kind of happiness that came from saving a life and knowing you'd made a difference. It was the same expression Luffy imagined Dr. Hiraluk must have worn every time he'd helped someone, regardless of whether they thanked him for it. Chopper, Luffy said, crouching down to the reindeer's eye level. How would you like to be a pirate? The question hung in the cold mountain air like a promise of adventure. Chopper's eyes went wide, then filled with tears, then crinkled at the edges as the biggest smile Luffy had ever seen spread across his furry face. Really? You want me? Course I do. Every crew needs a doctor, and you're the best one I've ever met. Crew member acquired, Tony Chopper Medical Officer, enlisted crew synchronization, enhanced inherited will. Strengthened as they made their way back down the mountain, Wapol secured, and ready to be handed over to whatever passed for justice on Drum Island. Luffy felt the system settling deeper into his consciousness. Each trial, each challenge, each person he helped was adding to something larger than just personal power. He was building a legacy, not just for himself, but for everyone who would come after him, everyone who would inherit the will to protect the weak and chase impossible dreams. Dr. Hiraluk had been right. There was no disease that couldn't be cured, no person who didn't deserve help. And with Chopper at his side and the system's power growing stronger every day, Luffy was starting to believe he might actually be able to live up to that promise. The Grand Line stretched out before them, vast and dangerous and full of possibilities. But for the first time since this whole adventure began, Luffy felt like he might actually be ready for whatever it threw at him. Bring on the Desert Kingdom. Bring on the Warlord. Bring on the future. Alabasta was dying. Luffy could smell it from miles away, the scent of a kingdom rotting from the inside out, civil war brewing like a storm on the horizon. His enhanced senses picked up fear, anger, desperation, all of it mixing together into a toxic cocktail that made his teeth ache. Kingdom status, critical instability, civil unrest. 89% and rising, estimated time to total collapse. 72 HOURS, primary cause. Systematic manipulation, recommendation. Immediate intervention required the merry cut through waters that had turned an unnatural blue-green, and even the sea itself felt wrong. Too warm, too still, like something massive was lurking beneath the surface and holding its breath. There, Vivi pointed toward the distant shoreline with a trembling finger. Nanohana. We can dock there and, her words cut off as the water around them began to bubble, not with heat, but with something else. Something that made the system's warning screens flash like an angry Christmas tree. Hostile system signature detected classification. Corrupted ancient variant power level. Extremely high source. Approaching rapidly from below, the sea exploded upward in a geyser of sand and salt water, and from it emerged a figure that had haunted VV's nightmares for months. Sir Crocodile rose from the depths like some primordial desert god, sand swirling around him in patterns that defied physics and common sense. But that wasn't what made Luffy's blood run cold. It was the other thing he could see, the twisted reflection of his own power that clung to Crocodile like a parasite made of shadow and hunger. Enemy System Analysis. SIR Crocodile Designation. SOONA no MI plus Corrupted Ancient System, System Origin. Stolen from AALABASTA Royal Bloodline Corruption Level. Maximum Mental Degradation. Severe but Stable Warning. Extremely dangerous combination. Well, Crocodile's voice carried across the water like grinding glass. Princess Vivi, and her new friends I assume, including, his cold eyes fixed on Luffy with laser precision. The one who's been awakening things that should have stayed buried. Sand began to spiral around the Mary, forming a barrier that would have trapped any normal crew, but Luffy wasn't feeling particularly normal today. "Let me guess," he said, stepping to the bow, "you're the guy who's been messing with VV's kingdom." "Messing with it?" Crocodile laughed, the sound like a sandstorm made audible. "My dear boy, I've been perfecting it. Turning it into exactly what it was always meant to be, a testing ground for power. My power." The corrupted system around Crocodile flared, and suddenly Luffy could see what the warlord had done to this place. Threads of stolen energy spread out from him like a spider's web, connecting to every grain of sand, every drop of water, every person in the kingdom. He turned the entire nation into a massive system interface, with himself as the administrator and everyone else as expendable resources. Dungeon field detected scope, entire kingdom complexity, unprecedented citizen status, unwilling participants termination condition, defeat dungeon master, you're insane, Luffy said, but his voice carried more sadness than anger. All these people and you're treating them like game pieces. Game pieces? Crocodile's smile was all teeth and malice. My boy, this isn't a game, this is evolution. The strong consume the weak, the clever exploit the foolish, and power goes to those willing to pay any price for it. His eyes glowed with corrupted system energy. Something you'll understand soon enough. The attack came without warning, a massive wave of sand that should have buried the Mary and everyone on it. But Luffy was already moving, his own system painting targeting data and escape routes across his vision. Evasive maneuvers required, crew protection protocol. Active, engaging enhanced mobility. Everyone hold on. Luffy stretched his arms out, grabbing his crew and launching them all skyward just as the sand wave crashed through where they'd been standing. The Mary disappeared beneath tons of weaponized desert, but his friends were safe in his rubber embrace. They landed hard on the beach of Nanohana, sand filling their mouths and clothes. But they were alive, which was more than Crocodile had apparently intended. Impressive reflexes, the warlord said, materializing from the sand near where they'd landed. The system has made you fast. But speed won't help you against what I've prepared. He raised his hook, and the entire city of Nanohana began to change. Buildings melted and reformed, streets rearranged themselves into geometric patterns, and the very air took on a golden hue that made breathing feel like swallowing honey. Citizens who'd been going about their daily business stopped moving, their eyes taking on the same glow as Crocodile's. Dungeon transformation, NaNoHana complexity, stage 1 of 5, citizen status. Converted to NPCS boss encounter. Preparing, welcome. Crocodile's voice now seemed to come from everywhere at once, to my masterpiece. 8 years of preparation, 8 years of converting this kingdom into the perfect testing ground. Every citizen is now an extension of my will, every building a trap, every grain of sand a weapon. Controlled people began emerging from buildings and alleys, moving with mechanical precision toward Luffy and his crew. But these weren't zombies or puppets, they were worse. They were people who'd had their free will stolen, turned into components of someone else's power fantasy. Bastard, Zoro growled, his swords already in his hands. You turned them into slaves. I turned them into something better, Crocodile corrected. Into purpose, into meaning. They serve something greater than their petty individual dreams. Moral evaluation. Enemy ACTIONS reprehensible psychological profile. Complete rejection of individual worth, inherited will response. Maximum opposition, Conqueror's HAKI. Awakening, the power hit Luffy like a physical thing, rising from somewhere deep in his chest and spreading outward in waves. Not the subtle influence he'd felt before, but something raw and overwhelming, the absolute refusal to accept that people could be treated as objects. His conqueror's haki slammed into the controlled citizens like a tsunami, and for a moment, their mechanical movements faltered. Eyes cleared, personalities reasserted themselves, and confused voices began asking what was happening. Crocodile's composure cracked for the first time. Impossible. My control is absolute. No one should be able to. Your control is garbage, Luffy interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. People aren't things you can own. They're not parts of your system or pieces in your game. They're people and they deserve to choose their own path. Conqueror's HAKI, evolution detected new ability, will liberation effect, can free individuals from mental domination range. Expanding, more citizens broke free from Crocodile's control, their confused voices rising in volume as they realized what had been done to them. The warlord's perfect system was developing cracks, and through those cracks, hope was beginning to seep in. You little, Crocodile's form dissolved into sand, reforming as a massive storm that filled the streets. Fine, no more games, let's settle this properly. The world around them shifted again, but this time the change was total. Nanohana disappeared, replaced by something that looked like the interior of a massive pyramid. Golden walls stretched up into darkness, hieroglyphs glowed with their own light, and in the center of it all stood a throne made of crystallized sand. Dungeon Evolution, Stage 5 activated location. The Sandy Coliseum boss fight, Crocodile the Desert King special conditions. System V's system, victory condition, Purify corrupted system, failure condition. Absorption by enemy system, now you see it, Crocodile said, settling onto his throne like he belonged there. The true scope of what I've accomplished. This entire kingdom has become my personal domain, every person in it a source of power. And you're going to become the crown jewel of my collection. The throne room filled with sand soldiers, not the crude constructs he'd used before, but perfect replicas of Alabasta's greatest warriors throughout history. Kings and queens, generals and heroes, all of them twisted into servants of Crocodile's will. Enemy forces. Historical AALABASDAA Army, quantity, 847 units, individual threat level. Moderate to high collective threat level, extreme, guys, Luffy said quietly, not taking his eyes off Crocodile. This one's mine. Like hell, Zoro started to protest. No, Luffy's voice carried a finality that stopped all arguments. This isn't just about fighting, it's about what these systems are really for. His is about taking, mine's about giving. If I can't win this alone, then I don't deserve to carry Joy Boy's will. Crew synchronization, temporary deactivation requested, solo combat mode, engaged warning. Significantly increased difficulty, confirmed decision. Luffy looked around at his friends, Zoro's concerned frown, Nami's barely controlled fear, Sanji's protective anger, Usopp's wide-eyed terror, Chopper's medical instincts warring with his trust in his captain, and Vivi's desperate hope mixed with guilt that her problems had led to this moment. I confirm, he said softly, but I need you guys to do something for me. Get to the real Alubarna, find the people who are still free. When I win this, they're going to need help putting their kingdom back together. When you win, Nami repeated, like she was trying to convince herself. When I win, Luffy agreed, his grin sharp as a blade. Because I'm not losing, not today, not ever. His crew looked like they wanted to argue, but something in his voice must have convinced them. One by one, they nodded and disappeared through a doorway that materialized in the pyramid wall, Crocodile's system giving them a way out, probably because the warlord wanted to face Luffy alone too. Touching, Crocodile said once they were gone, but ultimately pointless. You can't win this, boy. My system has been growing for 8 years. Yours has been active for what, a few weeks? You're a child playing with power you don't understand. Maybe, Luffy said, cracking his knuckles, but I understand something you don't. And what's that? Power isn't about how much you can take. Luffy's system interface exploded with light as every ability he'd gained, every lesson he'd learned, every bond he'd forged came online simultaneously. It's about how much you're willing to give. Full system activation, all abilities, online, inherited will, maximum resonance, final boss battle, begin the fight that followed was unlike anything Luffy had ever experienced. Crocodile wasn't just strong, he was smart, experienced, and backed by 8 years of stolen power. His sand moved with mechanical precision, his attacks came from impossible angles, and every move was calculated to exploit weaknesses that shouldn't have existed. But for every advantage Crocodile had, Luffy had something the warlord couldn't understand, the absolute certainty that he was fighting for something bigger than himself. Combat analysis. Enemy system superior in raw power, player advantage. Moral certainty, pure inheritance, recommended strategy. Outlast corruption, exploit system conflicts. The battle raged through the pyramid's chambers, each room presenting new challenges and obstacles. Crocodile threw everything he had at Luffy: poison clouds, sandstorms, gravity manipulation, even time dilation in some areas. But with each attack, with each new display of stolen power, the corruption in his system grew more obvious. Luffy could see it in the way Crocodile's movements became increasingly erratic, in the way his voice started to echo with multiple tones, in the way his very sand began to turn black at the edges. The stolen system was eating him alive from the inside, and he was too consumed by the need to win to realize it. "You're dying," Luffy said during a brief lull in the fighting, both of them breathing hard on opposite sides of a chamber filled with floating sand platforms. "What?" Crocodile's laugh was bitter. "Dying? Boy, I've never felt more alive." "No, you're literally dying. That system you stole, it's not meant for you. It's burning you up from the inside." Luffy dodged another wave of weaponized sand. "How long has it been since you slept? Really slept, not just meditated to manage the power drain?" Crocodile's attack faltered for just a moment, and in that moment, Luffy saw the truth. The warlord couldn't remember the last time he'd slept, or eaten a meal for pleasure instead of necessity, or felt any emotion that wasn't related to gaining more power. "It doesn't matter," Crocodile said, but his voice was less certain now. "Power requires sacrifice. I knew the price when I made the choice." "Did you?" Luffy landed on a platform closer to his enemy, his system showing him the extent of the corruption eating away at Crocodile's body. "Or did the system make the choice for you?" Enemy system analysis. Critical corruption detected. Host survival time 3-6 months maximum. System override. Active host autonomy. Severely compromised. That was the moment Luffy understood what he was really fighting. Not just Crocodile, but the corrupted system that was wearing him like a suit of clothes. The man who'd started this had probably died years ago, consumed by power he'd thought he could control. "I'm sorry," Luffy said, and meant it. "I'm sorry someone convinced you this was the only way to be strong." "Sorry?" Crocodile's form wavered, becoming more sand than human. "Sorry? You think your pity means anything too?" He cut off mid-sentence, his eyes widening as he seemed to see Luffy clearly for the first time. Through the haze of corruption and stolen power, something almost human flickered in his gaze. "You're not here to defeat me," he whispered. "You're here to save me." "If I can," Luffy said honestly. "But first I have to free you from that thing that's been eating your soul." Purification protocol, available warning. Extremely dangerous, success rate. Unknown, side effects. Severe energy drain, possible system damage. Proceed. Luffy looked at the corrupted warlord, at the stolen system that was turning a person into a monster, at the kingdom of innocent people who'd been caught in the crossfire of someone else's hunger for power. There was only one choice he could live with. "Gear third," he whispered, and his fist began to grow. But this wasn't the gigantic punch his opponents usually expected. Instead of inflating his hand into a massive weapon, Luffy was channeling something else through his enlarged limb, pure system energy, uncorrupted and blazing with the inherited will of every dreamer who'd ever refused to give up. Gomu Gomu no, his fist glowed white-hot with purification energy. Liberation, the punch connected not with Crocodile's body, but with the corrupted system wrapped around his soul. The impact sent shockwaves through the pyramid, through the kingdom, through the very fabric of the stolen power that had turned Alabasta into a nightmare. Light exploded from the point of contact, not destructive, but cleansing. The black sand turned gold again, the twisted hieroglyphs straightened themselves, and across the kingdom, people began to remember who they were supposed to be. Crocodile screamed as the corrupted system was torn away from him, years of stolen power flowing out like poison from a wound. But underneath the scream, Luffy's enhanced hearing picked up something else: relief. The desperate gratitude of someone who'd been drowning and finally found the surface. Purification, successful corrupted system, destroyed kingdom dungeon. Deactivated citizens, restored to free WILL, massive experience GAINED, new ability. Desert Kink's authority, warning. Severe system strain detected, lifespan impact. Significant, the pyramid collapsed around them, but gently, like a sand castle being claimed by tide. When the dust settled, they were standing in the real Alubarna's palace courtyard, and Crocodile was just a man again, exhausted, confused, but human. "What?" Crocodile stared at his own hands like he'd never seen them before. "I can think clearly. For the first time in years, I can actually think." Yeah, Luffy said, swaying on his feet as the cost of purification hit him. That's what happens when you're not being eaten alive by stolen power. He felt different too, stronger in some ways but diminished in others. The system was still there, still functional, but something fundamental had changed. When he caught his reflection in a piece of polished stone, he saw what the cost had been. A streak of white hair, starting at his temple and running back through his black locks like a lightning bolt made visible. Lifespan expenditure. 2 years 7 months. Current estimated lifespan. Reduced but stable. Warning. Continued high-level system use inadvisable. 2.5 years. That was what it had cost him to free one person from a corrupted system and restore an entire kingdom to sanity. And if he kept pushing like this, kept using the system's most powerful abilities to solve problems that maybe should have been solved differently. Luffy. Vivi's voice cut through his dark thoughts as she ran across the courtyard, his crew closed behind her. The kingdom, the people, they're all free, the civil war is over, how did you? She stopped when she saw his face, saw the white streak in his hair. Oh no, what did it cost you? Nothing I wouldn't pay again, Luffy said, and found that he meant it. Your people are free, that's worth any price. But as his crew gathered around him, their faces full of concern and love, and the kind of worry that came from seeing someone you cared about sacrifice pieces of themselves for others, Luffy realized something important. The system wasn't just making him stronger. It was making him responsible for choices that could literally cost him years of his life. And as they sailed away from Alabasta, Crocodile handed over to the Marines, the kingdom restored, Vivi choosing to stay with her people. He wondered if he was strong enough to keep making those choices. System evolution, 23%, new capabilities integrated, next destination. JAYA warning, even greater challenges await the grand line stretched out before them, vast and dangerous and full of possibilities. But now Luffy carried with him the visible reminder that great power came with great costs, and that some victories were paid for with pieces of your own future. The white streak in his hair caught the sunlight as he stood at the Mary's bow, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered how many more streaks he'd earn before this journey was over. But that was a problem for tomorrow's Luffy. Today's Luffy had saved a kingdom and freed a man's soul, and that was enough. For now. The white streak in Luffy's hair caught the morning sun as he stood at the Mary's bow, watching Jaya Island grow larger on the horizon. 3 days had passed since Alabasta, and the visible reminder of what that victory had cost him still drew worried glances from his crew. Lifespan monitoring, active current status. Stable but reduced recommendation. Minimize high-energy system usage. The system's warnings had become more frequent since the purification of Crocodile's corrupted power. More insistent. Like it was trying to protect him from himself, which was probably smart given his track record with doing stupid things for the right reasons. You sure you're okay? Chopper asked for the dozenth time that morning, his little hooves gripping the railing as he studied Luffy's face with professional concern. Your vital signs are stable, but that white hair, it's not natural. It's like your body aged in a very specific, targeted way. I'm fine, Chopper. Luffy ruffled the reindeer's hat affectionately. Really, it's just hair. It's not just hair, Robin said quietly from where she sat reading in the shade. It's a mark, a sign that you've paid a price most people never have to consider. Historical analysis. Robin's observation accurate, similar markings documented in ancient texts, previous system users. Multiple instances of premature aging. Pattern. Power usage correlates with lifespan reduction. Luffy looked over at Robin, whose dark eyes held a scholarly intensity that made him think she'd been researching more than just casual reading. You've been looking into this, haven't you? I've been trying to. She closed her book, something thick and ancient-looking that definitely hadn't been on the ship when they left Alabasta. But information about what you carry is scarce. Deliberately obscured, I think, almost like someone tried to erase it from history. The world government, Vivi said from where she was helping Nami plot their course. Even though she'd chosen to stay in Alabasta, the princess had insisted on sailing with them to Jaya to see them off properly. They've been hiding the truth about the Void Century for 800 years. If your power comes from that era, then they'd want it buried, Robin finished. Along with anyone who might awaken it. Historical context, Void Century suppression, world government, systematic information destruction, poneglyphs. Remaining evidence, system origin, confirmed Void Century era. The system's confirmation sent a chill down Luffy's spine. If the world government had been actively hunting people like him for 8 centuries, then his power made him more than just a pirate with a high bounty. It made him a threat to their entire foundation. Well, he said, pushing the worry aside with practiced ease, guess we'll just have to be stronger than whatever they throw at us. Jaya Island looked exactly like what it was, a piece of paradise that had been through hell. Lush jungle covered most of it, but sections of the coastline showed signs of old violence, and there was something in the air that made Luffy's enhanced senses twitch with unease. Island analysis. JAYA historical significance. Extremely high ancient system activity. Confirmed current inhabitants. Minimal hidden resources. Substantial, they docked at a makeshift pier that looked like it had been cobbled together from shipwrecks and driftwood. The only sign of current habitation was a ramshackle house built into what looked like half of a ship's hull, smoke curling from a chimney made of stacked cannonballs. Welcoming committee, Zoro observed, nodding toward the figure emerging from the house. The man looked like he'd been designed by someone who'd heard the concept of sea monkey, but had never actually seen one. Scarred, weathered, and built like a barrel with arms, he moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd survived things that would have killed most people twice over. Pirates, he said without preamble, looking them over with eyes that had seen too much. Don't get many of those anymore. Most of them are smart enough to stay away from cursed islands. Cursed how? Luffy asked, genuinely curious. The man, Cricket, according to the name floating above his head in the system interface, laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Cursed with history, kid. This place has seen things that shouldn't exist, and sometimes those things leave marks. Masira Cricket. Descendant of Montblanc historical connection. Confirmed knowledge level. Moderate to high potential ally. Significant Noland. The name triggered something in the system's memory banks, fragments of historical data that painted a picture of impossible promises and dreams that reached toward heaven itself. Your ancestor, Luffy said, the words coming from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. He was friends with a giant bell, wasn't he? Cricket's reaction was immediate and electric. He spun around so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet, his eyes wide with shock and something that might have been hope. How the hell do you know about that? About Noland and the bell and… He stopped, his gaze fixing on the white streak in Luffy's hair. Oh shit, you're one of them, aren't you? One of the old power carriers. One of the what now? Instead of answering, Cricket turned and walked back toward his house, gesturing for them to follow. Come on. If you're what I think you are, then there's something you need to see. Something Noland left behind for people like you. The inside of Cricket's house was a museum of impossibilities. Charts of currents that defied physics, maps of islands that shouldn't exist, and books written in languages that made Robin's eyes light up with scholarly excitement. But what caught Luffy's attention was the logbook sitting open on Cricket's desk. Its pages yellowed with age and written in handwriting that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Ancient text detected author, Montblanc system resonance. High historical value, critical, he wrote about them, Cricket said, noticing Luffy's fascination with the book. The people who carried heaven's blessing. Said they were marked by the gods themselves, given power that came with a price. Robin was already moving toward the logbook, her historian's instincts overriding everything else. May I? Cricket nodded, and she began reading aloud, her voice taking on the cadence of someone translating as she went. Day 847 of our exploration. The Golden City's elders speak of ancient visitors, men and women who carried the will of the sky itself. They called them inheritors, blessed with power that could reshape the world but cursed to burn bright and brief as shooting stars. System designation confirmed. Inheritors historical pattern. Short LIFESBANS due to power usage previous users. Multiple documented cases, common trait, premature aging or death, day 863, Robin continued. The great bell rings today, its song reaching toward the heavens where the inheritors are said to gather when their earthly journey ends. Kalgara speaks of a promise, that someday, one will come who understands what the power is truly for. Luffy felt something twist in his chest, a recognition that went deeper than memory. Kalgara, another name that resonated with the system's ancient data banks. Day 901, the Knockup stream carries more than water toward the Sky Island. It carries dreams, promises, the weight of bonds that transcend death itself. If an inheritor were to ride it, enhanced by their power, perhaps they could reach places others cannot. Sky Island, Luffy said, his voice barely above a whisper. There's really a Sky Island. Skypia, Cricket confirmed, 10,000 meters up, floating on clouds that shouldn't be able to hold so much as a feather. Noland and Kalgara, they made a promise to each other. One that's been waiting 400 years to be kept. Quest triggered, The promise of SHANDORA objective, reach SKYPEIA and reunite the Golden Bell historical significance. Maximum system enhancement available for NOQP stream navigation, warning, extreme danger. And you think I can get there, Luffy said, looking out at the ocean where the knock-up stream was supposed to emerge. I think you're the first person in 400 years who might have the power to try, Cricket said. The knock-up stream is violent enough to kill most crews instantly. But with that system of yours enhancing your ship's durability, guiding your navigation, we could actually make it, Nami finished, her voice mixing excitement with terror in equal measure. Robin was still reading, her face growing more animated with each passage. Luffy, listen to this. Day 924, the Sky Island serves a purpose beyond simple habitation. It is a testing ground, a place where inheritors prove their worthiness to carry power that could reshape nations. Those who fail are cast down, those who succeed. She trailed off, her eyes widening. What? Luffy prompted. Those who succeed what? Those who succeed gain access to the archive, the collected knowledge of every inheritor who came before, every lesson learned, every price paid. It's all there waiting. The archive, confirmed existence location. SKYPEIA upper VARTH contents. Complete system history access requirement. Prove worthiness through trial warning. Current guardian potentially hostile guardian. The system's warning made Luffy's blood run cold. What kind of guardian? Analyzing available data. Guardian identity. ENEL, the god of SKYPEIA power source. GORO no MI plus corrupted system fragment. Status. Extremely dangerous, special note. Views inheritors as THREATS to his authority, so that's where this was heading. Another corrupted system user, another person consumed by stolen power. But this one was calling himself a god and had 400 years of isolation to develop his delusions. There's someone up there, Luffy said, the certainty settling in his bones. Someone like Crocodile, someone who's been twisted by power that isn't really his. Cricket nodded grimly. The stories from Skypia stopped coming down about 20 years ago. Before that, we'd occasionally get news, messages tied to birds or thrown from the clouds. But 20 years ago, everything went silent. 20 years, Chopper said, his medical mind already making connections. That's about how long it would take for system corruption to completely consume someone's personality. Timeline analysis. Confirmed Enel's corruption. NEAR complete estimated power level. Extremely high personality degradation. Total warning. Considers himself divine. The knock-up stream hit at exactly 11 a.m., just as Cricket's calculations had predicted. But what emerged from the ocean wasn't the simple geyser of water Luffy had been expecting. It was a pillar of liquid force that reached toward the clouds like a fist punching through reality itself. Now, Cricket shouted over the roar. If you're going to do this, it has to be now. The Mary shot forward under Sanji's expert navigation, riding the edge of the massive updraft. But even as they approached the base of the knock-up stream, Luffy could feel the raw violence of it. Water moving fast enough to pulverize rock, pressure that would crush an ordinary ship like paper. They needed more than luck to survive this. They needed enhancement. Knock-up stream navigation, available system enhancement, ship reinforcement, crew protection protocols, ready warning, significant energy expenditure required, estimated LIFESPAN cost. 2-4 MONTHS, more of his life. Always more of his life, traded for the chance to protect the people he cared about and reach the places he needed to go. Do it, he said quietly, placing his hands on the Mary's railing. Power flowed out of him and into the ship, golden energy that made the going Mary glow like a small sun. Her timbers strengthened, her sails became resistant to tearing, and something indefinable shifted in her fundamental nature. She became, for a brief time, more than just wood and iron and canvas. Ship enhancement, complete duration, 30 minutes survivability, dramatically increased. They hit the knock-up stream like a cork shot from the world's largest bottle. The violence of it was indescribable. Water and pressure and acceleration that should have killed them all, but Luffy's enhancement held. The Mary rode the impossible current upward, climbing toward clouds that grew larger and more solid as they approached. But something was wrong. The system's warnings were going haywire, painting threat assessments and danger markers across his vision faster than he could process them. Aerial detection, multiple hostiles, threat classification, Sky Island natives status. Territorial defense mode, special warning. Enhanced by unknown power source, they broke through the cloud layer into a world that defied every law of physics Luffy had ever learned. Islands floating in the sky, supported by clouds that had somehow become solid enough to hold forests and cities and entire civilizations. But the beauty of it was marred by the obvious signs of conflict. Burn marks on the cloud islands, skeletal remains of ships that had tried and failed to reach this place, and in the distance, the ominous shape of what looked like a massive arc crackling with electrical energy. Skypia analysis. Under authoritarian control, population. Suppressed, ruler. ENEL-CLAIMS divine status, resistance. Minimal but present, golden bell. Location confirmed, upper VARTH, welcome, a voice said from above them, carrying the kind of arrogant amusement that made Luffy's teeth itch. To my domain. Lightning split the sky, not natural lightning, but controlled bolts that danced around a figure descending from the clouds like some twisted version of an angel. Enel was tall, pale, and radiated the kind of casual cruelty that came from absolute power exercised without restraint. But what made Luffy's blood run cold was what he could see wrapped around Enel's form like spiritual armor, fragments of a system that had been so thoroughly corrupted they barely resembled their original purpose. Enel, self-proclaimed god of Skypia, power source. Goro no mi plus ancient system fragments, corruption level, complete psychological status. Messianic complex with genocidal tendencies, special ability. Enhanced observation HAKI via system integration, another inheritor, Enel continued, his voice carrying across the sky like thunder made verbal. How delightful. It's been so long since I've had the pleasure of demonstrating why I am the only god this world needs. Lightning began building around his form, not the wild electricity of a storm, but controlled power that spoke of years spent perfecting the art of destruction. You know, Luffy said, settling into a fighting stance on the Mary's deck, I'm getting really tired of meeting people who think power makes them gods. Enel laughed, the sound sharp enough to crack clouds. Power. Child, I don't just have power, I am power. I am the divine will made manifest, the judgment of heaven itself. Enemy analysis. ENEL, the false god, threat level, maximum special warning. Corrupted system grants precognitive abilities, recommended strategy. Unknown, no previous data for this level of system corruption. This was it then. The real test of what Luffy had learned, what he'd become, and whether the price he'd paid in years of his life had been worth it. Above them, the golden bell of Chandra waited in silence, its song unheard for 400 years. Below them, the people of both sky and land looked up with hope they dared not voice. And between them and their goal stood a man who had confused power with divinity, and spent 20 years proving that absolute corruption was exactly as dangerous as absolute power. Luffy cracked his knuckles and smiled, the expression sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. Time to teach a false god what a real inheritor could do. Final warning. Battle ahead will determine system's ultimate nature, pure inheritance vs complete corruption. Winner shapes the future of all inheritors. Good luck, Monkei de Luffy. The first bolt of lightning hit the Mary's mainmast and should have reduced the entire ship to splinters and ash. Instead, it bounced off like rain hitting glass, the system's protective enhancement turning Enel's divine judgment into nothing more than an impressive light show. Impossible, Enel said, his voice losing some of its godly confidence. My lightning is absolute, it destroys everything it touches. Maybe everything else, Luffy said, jumping from the ship's deck to land on one of the floating cloud islands that surrounded them. But I'm not everything else. The moment his feet touched solid ground, well, solid cloud that somehow felt like marble, the world around him shifted. Ancient golden architecture rose from the clouds like something out of a fever dream, all impossible angles and surfaces that gleamed with their own inner light. Location update, Upper VARTH, Golden City of Shandora, historical significance. Maximum ancient system energy, concentrated here, warning, environment will amplify all abilities, this was it. This was Chandra, the golden city that Noland and Kalgara had fought to protect, now floating 10,000 meters above the earth and twisted into a battleground by 4 centuries of neglect and 20 years of false godhood. You stand in the heart of my domain, Enel said, materializing on a platform of pure electricity about 50 feet away. Here I am truly omnipotent. Every cloud obeys my will, every spark of static bends to my desire. To demonstrate his point, he raised his hand and the entire city began to change. Golden platforms shifted and rearranged themselves into an arena that stretched as far as the eye could see, with pillars of crystallized lightning rising from the cloud floor like the world's most dangerous forest. Environment analysis. Combat arena SHANDORA configuration, terrain advantage. Heavily favors electricity users, system enhancement available, environmental adaptation cost, moderate energy expenditure special option. Weather manipulation protocols detected weather manipulation. Since when did his system include weather control? Analyzing current environment. Electrical storm conditions, optimal lightning redirection, possible weather dominion. Early access available, warning. Untested ability, use with extreme caution. Enel was already moving, his form dissolving into pure electricity as he traveled along the lightning pillars at the speed of light itself. To anyone else, he would have been literally impossible to track. But Luffy's enhanced perception caught the telltale energy signature, the way the corrupted system fragments around Enel created a kind of electrical shadow. 200 million volts, Enel announced from somewhere behind him. El Thor, the lightning bolt was massive, wide as a tree trunk and carrying enough power to level a building. It slammed into the golden platform where Luffy had been standing, turning ancient metal into slag and sending shockwaves across the entire city. But Luffy wasn't there anymore. He was above, stretched between two lightning pillars like a rubber band, grinning down at the false god with something that was equal parts amusement and pity. "You know what your problem is," he called down. "You think being flashy is the same as being strong. Activating Gear 2nd protocols, system enhancement, cardiovascular amplification warning. Early access increased strain on body, blood pressure spike incoming. Steam began rising from Luffy's skin as his heart rate doubled, then tripled, pumping blood through his system at speeds that should have been fatal. But the system was guiding the process, making his body capable of handling pressures that would have killed an ordinary person. Gear 2nd, he whispered, and suddenly the world slowed down around him. Enel's next attack came in slow motion, a barrage of lightning bolts meant to saturate the entire area with electrical death. But now Luffy could see the pattern, could track each individual bolt and calculate exactly where the gaps would be. He dropped toward the golden floor, bouncing between lightning strikes with casual ease, each movement precise and controlled despite the incredible speed. To Enel, he probably looked like he was teleporting. "Impossible," the false god snarled, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Nothing is faster than lightning." "You're right," Luffy said, appearing on a platform just a few feet away from his enemy. "Nothing is faster than lightning. But I don't have to be faster than lightning. Weather manipulation, active lightning redirection, online drawing power from environmental electrical activity, I just have to be smarter than the guy throwing it around." Luffy reached out and grabbed one of Enel's lightning bolts, actually grabbed it, his rubber body somehow interfacing with the electrical energy and redirecting it back toward its source. The look of absolute shock on Enel's face was worth every month of life this fight was probably costing him. "What are you?" Enel demanded, his voice rising to a shriek as his own lightning wrapped around him like chains. "I'm a pirate," Luffy said simply, "and you're in my way." Gamugeo Immuno techniques, enhanced by electrical absorption, lightning-infused combat, available system warning. Power combination unstable. The fight that followed was like something out of mythology. Two figures moving at impossible speeds across a golden city suspended in the clouds, trading blows that lit up the sky and sent shockwaves rippling across the heavens. Enel fought with the desperate fury of someone whose entire worldview was crumbling. Every attack was meant to prove his divinity, to demonstrate that gods could not be defeated by mere mortals. Lightning turned into spears, electricity became armor, and the very air crackled with enough power to level mountains. But Luffy fought with something Enel couldn't understand, purpose beyond himself. Every punch was thrown to free the people of Skypia from 20 years of tyranny. Every dodge was calculated to protect his crew, still watching from the merry far below. Every absorbed lightning bolt was redirected not just to hurt Enel, but to prove that no one had the right to call themselves God over others. Combat analysis. Enemy system degrading under stress, corruption creating system conflicts, Enel's power. Becoming increasingly unstable, recommend. Exploit system vulnerabilities. "You're falling apart," Luffy observed, landing on a golden platform that was still smoking from their last exchange. "That power you stole, it's eating you alive." Enel's form was flickering now, shifting between solid flesh and pure electricity in ways that couldn't be comfortable. The corrupted system fragments around him were sparking and smoking, overloaded by 20 years of misuse and the stress of facing a true inheritor. "I am eternal," Enel screamed, but his voice was breaking, multiplying into harmonics that suggested his very identity was fracturing. "I am divine, I am." You're dying, Luffy finished sadly. And you don't even know it. Enemy system status. Critical failure imminent, host survival. Unlikely without intervention purification option. Available but extremely dangerous success rate. 23% failure consequence. Total system overload, 23%. Those weren't good odds, especially when failure meant not just losing the fight, but potentially dying in a system overload that could level half of Skypia. But as Luffy looked at Enel, really looked, with all the perception the system had given him, he saw what lay beneath the madness and corruption. A man who had started with noble intentions, who had wanted to protect his people and bring order to chaos, but who had been consumed by power that promised easy solutions to complex problems. I'm going to try to save you, Luffy said, settling into a stance that would let him channel every bit of power the system could provide. But I need you to stop fighting me for 30 seconds. Save me? Enel's laughter was brittle glass. I am a god, I need no salvation from a… You're a person, Luffy interrupted, his voice carrying the absolute conviction that had gotten him through every impossible situation so far. A person who made a mistake 20 years ago and got lost, but it's not too late. Purification protocol, ready warning, this will drain significant LIFESBAN estimated cost. 6-12 MONTHS proceed. Luffy looked up at the golden bell that hung silent above them, then out at the people of Skypia hiding in their homes, afraid to hope that their nightmare might finally be ending. He thought about Noland and Kalgura, about promises made and kept across impossible distances, about what it meant to inherit not just power but responsibility. Yeah, he said quietly. Proceed. The final attack wasn't a punch or a kick or any kind of traditional fighting technique. It was something new, something the system created by combining all of Luffy's abilities with the accumulated electrical energy he'd absorbed throughout the fight. Gomu Gomu no. His entire body began to glow, rubber and lightning and purified system energy, combining into something that transcended any single power source. Divine liberation. The technique hit Enel not with force but with understanding. For just a moment, the corrupted system fragments were stripped away, and the false god saw himself as he really was, a frightened man who had convinced himself that domination was the same as protection. The scream that followed wasn't one of pain, but of relief. 20 years of madness flowed out of Enel like poison from a wound, taking with it the corrupted system fragments that had been eating his soul. When it was over, he collapsed to his knees on the golden platform, looking small and fragile and entirely human. Purification. Successful corrupted system fragments. Absorbed and converted new ability GAINED, Weather Dominion Enel. Restored to sanity lifespan cost. 8 MONTHS. Another streak of white appeared in Luffy's hair, this one starting from his other temple. The system's power was incredible, but it was burning through his life at a rate that would have terrified him if he'd been the type to worry about things he couldn't change. What did I do? Enel was staring at his hands like he'd never seen them before. 20 years, oh God, 20 years of being sick, Luffy said gently, settling down beside the former false god. But you're better now. Weather manipulation, fully integrated electrical storm control, available atmospheric pressure, manageable special ability, can ring golden bell with enhanced power, the golden bell. Right. The whole reason they'd come here. The bell, Luffy said, looking up at the massive bronze structure that had been silent for 400 years. Noland and Kalgura, they're waiting. Enel followed his gaze and something shifted in his expression. I remember, before the madness, I remember the stories, the promise between earth and sky. Quest completion available. The promise of SHANDORA, ring the golden bell with Weather Dominion enhancement, warning. Enhanced bell will reach unprecedented distances. Special note. Signal may attract unwanted attention. Luffy reached out with his new weather control abilities, gathering the electrical energy still crackling through the air around them. Lightning danced between his fingers like tame pets, and he could feel the atmospheric pressure responding to his will. Help me, he said to Enel. Help me ring it properly. Together, they channeled power into the ancient bell, not the destructive force Enel had wielded as a false god, but something cleaner, more purposeful. The bronze began to resonate, building toward a tone that would carry across impossible distances. When the bell finally rang, the sound was indescribable. It wasn't just music, it was emotion made audible, 400 years of longing and separation, and hope finally given voice. The tone echoed across Skypia, down through the clouds to Jaya far below and then kept going. Up through the atmosphere, past the limits of the world itself, carrying a message that transcended language or culture or species. We remember. We keep our promises. The friendship between Earth and Sky lives on. Bell resonance, exceeding all previous records, signal strength. Planetary range, special achievement. Moon signal detected, warning. Response incoming from lunar observers, monarchs. Attention GAINED, threat assessment. Unknown but significant, the system's warning about monarchs made Luffy's blood run cold, but before he could ask for clarification, something else demanded his attention. In the distance, visible even from their position high above the clouds, something was moving on the moon's surface. Ancient structures were awakening, sending answering signals back toward the Earth. Whatever civilization had built them had been waiting for this moment, for the bell to ring with enough power to reach across the void between worlds. "What have we done?" Enel whispered, his newly clear eyes tracking the lights now visible on the lunar surface. "What we had to do," Luffy said, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it. "Kept a promise, the rest. We'll figure out the rest when it gets here." Quest completed. The promise of SHANDORA, massive experience GAINED, Weather Dominion. Fully integrated special achievement. Awaken the Lunar Watchers, system evolution. 31% warning. Your actions have consequences beyond this world. As they made their way down from the Golden City, Enel supporting Luffy when the exhaustion from using so much power threatened to overwhelm him, the people of Skypia began to emerge from their hiding places. 20 years of tyranny were over, ended by a rubber pirate who'd been willing to sacrifice pieces of his own life to free a stranger's soul. But even as celebration erupted across the Sky Islands, Luffy couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just set something in motion that was much bigger than any of them understood. The moon was sending signals back to Earth, the system was warning about monarchs, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he could swear he heard something like vast wings beating against the void between stars. Next destination. Water 7 estimated arrival. 5 days warning. Government forces mobilizing, special note. Your recent activities have not gone unnoticed, recommend. Prepare for escalation as the Mary descended through the clouds, carried by a knock-up stream that Luffy's weather control had made gentle enough to survive. He stood at the bow and watched the ocean grow larger below them. His crew was celebrating their victory. Enel was trying to figure out how to apologize to an entire civilization for 20 years of tyranny, and somewhere far above, the moon continued to signal its mysterious response to the bell that had finally sung again. The Grand Line stretched out before them, no longer just an ocean of adventure, but a stage for something that might determine the fate of more than just this world. And Luffy, with his growing system and shrinking lifespan, was apparently going to be right in the middle of it. He touched the new white streak in his hair and grinned despite the exhaustion and the ominous warnings, and the feeling that every victory was somehow making their situation more complicated. Bring on the monarchs. Bring on whatever was coming from the moon. Bring on the world government and their centuries of secrets. He was Monkey D. Luffy, inheritor of Joy Boy's will, and he'd made a promise to become the Pirate King. If that meant facing down gods and false gods and whatever cosmic forces thought they could stop him, well, he'd faced worse odds before. Probably. System warning. The real adventure is just beginning. The first sign that something was wrong with Water 7 wasn't the city itself. Though the massive floating metropolis built around the sea train tracks was impressive enough to make even seasoned Grand Line travelers stop and stare. It wasn't even the Aqua Laguna, the massive tidal wave that was still days away but already making the ocean restless with anticipation. It was Robin. Crew member status, NICO Robin psychological state. Severe distress, hidden condition. Death flag activated, threat assessment. Imminent danger to crew member, emergency protocols. Stand by, Luffy stared at the floating red text above Robin's head, his blood turning to ice in his veins. Death flag, what the hell did that mean? Robin, he said quietly, moving to where she sat reading at the bow. You okay? She looked up with that serene smile she always wore, but now that the system was highlighting it, Luffy could see the cracks. The way her hands trembled just slightly when she turned pages. The dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping. The way she kept glancing toward the horizon like she was expecting something terrible to appear. I'm fine, Captain, she said, but her voice carried undertones that made his enhanced senses scream warnings. Just enjoying the view. Lie detection. Confirmed subject is concealing significant emotional distress recommendation. Immediate intervention, death flag status. Escalating. No, you're not, Luffy said, settling down beside her. Something's wrong, really wrong, and whatever it is, we can fix it. For just a moment, Robin's mask slipped. Fear, guilt, and a deep exhaustion flickered across her face before she slammed her composure back into place. Some things can't be fixed, Luffy. Some prices are too high to avoid paying. What price? His voice carried the tone that had gotten him through every impossible situation so far, the absolute refusal to accept that any problem was unsolvable. What aren't you telling us? Before Robin could answer, Nami's voice cut across the deck. Luffy, we've got company. A dozen ships were approaching from the direction of Water 7, but these weren't ordinary vessels. They moved with military precision, their hulls painted in the distinctive white and blue of World Government Marines. But what made Luffy's system go haywire with warnings was what he could see wrapped around several of the officers aboard. Enemy detection, government system suppressors, classification, artificial system dampeners, purpose, disable inheritor abilities, effectiveness, moderate to high, warning, experimental technology system suppressors. The world government had developed technology specifically designed to counter people like him. Robin, he said, his voice deadly quiet. What did you do? What I had to do, she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. They found me, Luffy. After 20 years of running, they finally found me, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Historical analysis. OHARA incident subject, only survivor of Scholar Massacre, World Government Bounty. Active since age 8, current situation. Likely blackmail or coercion. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Robin had been running from the world government her entire life, branded a criminal at 8 years old for the crime of existing when her island was destroyed. And now they'd found her again, but this time they had leverage she couldn't ignore. They threatened us, Luffy said, and it wasn't a question. Robin nodded miserably. CP9, the world government's secret assassination squad. They said if I didn't come quietly, they'd use their new weapons to eliminate every person I'd ever sailed with. They have system suppressors, Luffy, technology that can shut down inheritor abilities entirely. CP9. Cypher Paul Aegis 0, classification. Elite government assassins, new equipment. System suppression technology, mission parameters. Capture inheritor alive, secondary objective. Acquire ancient weapon blueprints, ancient weapon blueprints. What did that have to do with anything? Before Luffy could ask, the lead marine ship pulled alongside the Mary, and figures began leaping across the gap with superhuman agility. 6 of them, all dressed in dark suits and radiating the kind of controlled violence that came from years of professional killing. But what made Luffy's blood run cold was the 7th figure, a man in a white suit who moved with the casual confidence of someone who'd never met a problem he couldn't solve with sufficient application of force. Enemy analysis, Rob LUCCI classification, CP9 leader plus experimental system user power source. NEHKOH no MI plus government system variant threat level, extremely high special note. First successful government system integration, Nico Robin, Luchi said, his voice carrying the flat emotionlessness of someone who'd had his humanity surgically removed. You will come with us now. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Like hell she will, Luffy stepped between Robin and the CP9 agents, his system already painting combat analysis across his vision. Robin's part of my crew. She goes where she wants to go. Luchi tilted his head slightly, studying Luffy with the clinical interest of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. Monkey D. Luffy, the Inheritor. Our scientists have been most eager to study your capabilities firsthand. Your scientists can study my fist up close, Luffy shot back, but his bravado was tempered by the system's tactical analysis. 6 professional assassins, all equipped with suppression technology, led by someone with a government-modified system. The odds were not in their favor. Combat assessment. Enemy advantage significant, system suppressors. Active and targeting recommendation. Tactical withdrawal warning. Robin's death flag still active. Actually, Luchi continued, our primary mission is the acquisition of certain blueprints. The woman is secondary. If you could direct us to Tom's apprentice, we can conclude our business here with minimal bloodshed. Tom's apprentice. The system fed Luffy fragments of historical data, Tom the legendary shipwright, builder of the Oro Jackson, keeper of the Pluton blueprints. And his apprentice would be Frankie, Robin said quietly. They want Frankie. Pluton blueprint resonance detected ancient weapon, confirmed existence, system compatibility, extremely high warning. Government acquisition of Pluton would be catastrophic. Luffy's system was practically screaming warnings now, painting threat assessments and tactical options across his vision faster than he could process them. The world government wanted Robin because she could read the ancient weapons locations, and they wanted Frankie because he had the blueprints to build them. and they had system suppression technology specifically designed to stop him from interfering. "Zoro," Luffy said quietly, not taking his eyes off Lucci, "get everyone to safety." "Captain," Zoro started to protest. "Go," the tone brooked no argument. "This is bigger than just us now. They want to build weapons that can destroy entire islands, and they've got the technology to shut down my abilities. We need time to figure out how to fight them." System suppression, detected activation interference field. Expanding abilities, reduction of 60% effectiveness, emergency protocols. Attempting compensation, the world felt different suddenly, muffled, like someone had wrapped cotton around his brain. His enhanced senses dulled, his tactical analysis became sluggish, and the constant stream of information from the system slowed to a trickle. This was what it felt like to be ordinary again, and it was terrifying. "Fascinating," Lucci observed, noting Luffy's obvious discomfort. "The suppression field is working even better than projected. You can feel it, can't you? The power you've grown dependent on, slipping away like sand through your fingers." "I don't need the system to kick your ass," Luffy said, but even to his own ears it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Lucci's smile was sharp as broken glass. "We shall see." The fight that followed was unlike any Luffy had experienced since the system awakened. Every punch felt sluggish, every dodge came a split second too late, and his enhanced reflexes were reduced to purely human reaction times. But worse than the physical limitations was the mental fog. Without the system's tactical analysis, he was fighting blind against opponents who knew exactly what his capabilities were and how to counter them. System functionality. 23% and declining, warning. Complete suppression imminent, emergency suggestion. Retreat to regain system access. Luffy tried to activate Gear Second, but the familiar rush of power never came. His heart rate increased, but the system enhancement that made it sustainable was gone. Instead of superhuman speed, he got lightheadedness and the taste of copper in his mouth. "The suppression field disrupts the connection between user and system," Lucci explained conversationally, even as he launched attacks that should have been impossible to survive. "Without that connection, an inheritor becomes simply another pirate with delusions of grandeur." A kick to the ribs sent Luffy flying across the deck, crashing into the mainmast hard enough to crack the wood. Through blurred vision, he saw his crew fighting their own battles. Zoro engaging 2 CP9 agents with grim determination. Sanji trading kicks with a man who seemed to be made of iron. Nami desperately trying to reach Robin while dodging attacks from a woman who could create soap bubbles that exploded on contact. They were losing. Without his system-enhanced abilities to coordinate their efforts and boost their capabilities, his crew was just 5 talented individuals against 6 professional killers with military-grade equipment. Crew status. Critical system functionality, 12% and falling, death flag alert, multiple crew members now AT risk, emergency protocol, final warning, the system was dying. Cut off from its connection to him by the suppression field, it was shutting down piece by piece, taking with it all the enhancements and abilities that had made them capable of facing the impossible challenges of the Grand Line. But as Luffy struggled to stand, something else stirred in his chest. Something older than the system, deeper than the inherited will of Joy Boy. Something that had been there long before lightning struck in Logtown and ancient power awakened in his blood. The absolute refusal to let his friends be hurt because he wasn't strong enough to protect them. Detecting anomalous energy source, classification, unknown origin, host's natural will system note. This power predates Inheritor awakening, warning, attempting TO analyze. Error, analysis incomplete, recommendation, trust in original strength. "You know what?" Luffy said, wiping blood from his mouth as he stood up. "Maybe you're right. Maybe without the system, I'm just another pirate with delusions." Lucci raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting some kind of desperate last stand. "But here's the thing," Luffy continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. "I was already planning to be the Pirate King before any of this system stuff happened. I was already willing to die for my crew before I knew what an inheritor was." Natural HAKI awakening detected, Conqueror's HAKI. Manifesting without system assistance, power source. Pure human WILL, suppression effectiveness. Minimal, the air around Luffy began to shimmer with heat that had nothing to do with Gear Second. This was something else entirely, raw determination made manifest, the kind of willpower that bent reality through sheer refusal to accept defeat. "The system made me stronger," he said, and now his voice was carrying across the entire ship, causing even the CP9 agents to pause in their attacks. "But it didn't make me who I am, and who I am is someone who doesn't lose friends. Conqueror's HAKI, full manifestation suppression field, partially overcome system functionality, emergency restoration to 34% warning. Unsustainable power draw, estimated duration, 90 seconds, 90 seconds. That was what he had to end this fight, save his crew, and figure out how to deal with a world government that had spent 800 years developing weapons specifically designed to kill people like him. Impossible, Luchi breathed, staring as the suppression field flickered and wavered around Luffy. The field should be absolute. No inheritor should be able to— I'm not just an inheritor, Luffy said, cracking his knuckles as power flowed back into his system. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm going to be the king of the pirates. Combat mode, desperation protocol active, all systems, maximum output time limit, 87 seconds warning. This level of output will cause permanent damage. Proceed. Luffy looked around at his crew, Robin's tears, Zoro's grim determination, Nami's fear, Sanji's protective fury, Usopp's desperate courage. They were his family, chosen and cherished, and no government in the world had the right to take them away. Proceed, he said quietly. The explosion of power that followed lit up Water 7 like a second sun. Conqueror's haki and system energy combined in ways that shouldn't have been possible, creating something new and terrifying and utterly unstoppable. But even as Luffy felt strength flood back into his limbs, even as the suppression field cracked and shattered under the weight of his pure determination, he knew this was only the beginning. The world government had been hunting inheritors for 800 years. They had technology, resources, and the kind of institutional patience that came from centuries of practice. And somewhere in the back of his mind, the system's warnings about monarchs and lunar observers suggested that the real threat was still coming. But right now, in this moment, he had 90 seconds to save his friends and show a government full of tyrants what happened when they threatened his family. Time to make every second count. 85 seconds remaining, target acquired. Rob Lucci combat initiated, 84 seconds remaining, Luffy moved like lightning made flesh. The suppression field that had been choking his abilities crumbled under the weight of pure, undiluted willpower. And suddenly, he was everything the system had promised and more. Faster than thought, stronger than steel, and burning with the kind of determination that could reshape reality through sheer refusal to accept defeat. Rob Lucci barely had time to register movement before Luffy's fist connected with his jaw, sending the CP9 leader flying across Water 7's harbor like a missile. The impact created a sonic boom that shattered windows for miles around and sent every bird in the city fleeing for clearer skies. Combat effectiveness, 347% of normal capacity, system strain. Critical physical damage to host, accumulating warning, this output is unsustainable, Luffy ignored the warnings. Pain was temporary, but letting his crew get captured was permanent. Zoro, he called out, even as he bounced off a building to redirect his momentum toward where Lucci was picking himself out of a crater. Get Robin and the others to safety. I'll handle the government lapdogs. 79 seconds remaining, Lucci emerged from the rubble, his white suit torn and bloodied, but his eyes burning with the kind of fanatical determination that made him the world government's most dangerous weapon. Impressive, but raw power means nothing without the skill to use it properly. Enemy analysis. Rob Lucci, enhanced state government system, adapting to combat conditions, new ability detected. Life return plus system integration, threat assessment. Exponentially increasing, the transformation that followed was unlike anything in nature. Lucci's body swelled and changed, muscles expanding beyond human limits while maintaining perfect proportion and control. His government-modified system was enhancing his devil fruit abilities, creating a fusion of biological enhancement and technological augmentation that turned him into something that was barely recognizable as human. This is the future, Lucci said, his voice now carrying harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords working in unison. Perfect integration of human will, devil fruit power, and system enhancement. You are witnessing evolution in action. 72 seconds remaining, I'm witnessing a guy who forgot what it means to be human, Luffy shot back, dodging a claw swipe that would have taken his head off. But that's okay. I'll remind you. Activating gear second plus third combination warning, unprecedented power draw system compensation. Attempting. Error. Power requirements exceed safe parameters. Steam erupted from Luffy's skin as his cardiovascular system shifted into overdrive. But instead of just increasing his speed, he was also inflating specific muscle groups to maximize impact force. It was a combination that should have been impossible. Gear Second's need for enhanced blood flow conflicting with Gear Third's requirement for controlled air pressure. But the desperation protocol was making impossible things routine. Gomu no, his fist inflated to the size of a building while maintaining Gear Second's speed enhancement. Jet Gigant Pistol, the punch connected with Luchi's enhanced form and sent shockwaves through the entire city. Buildings swayed, the sea itself seemed to recoil, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of the attack echoed off the mountains like thunder made solid. Impact force, equivalent to small earthquake collateral damage. Extensive but non-fatal enemy status. Significantly damaged but mobile, 64 seconds remaining, Luchi picked himself up again, but this time there was something different in his eyes. Not just the clinical detachment of a government assassin, but a flicker of actual emotion. Fear, maybe, or the first stirrings of doubt about his own invincibility. "You're stronger than our projections indicated," he admitted, circling Luffy like a predator looking for an opening. "But strength without purpose is meaningless. What are you really fighting for, Straw Hat?" "My friends," Luffy said simply. "My crew, the right of people to choose their own path instead of having it chosen for them by governments and systems and anyone else who thinks they know better." Conquerors HAKI, resonating with statement of purpose, nearby allies. Strength boost detected, enemy morale. Declining, the declaration rippled outward like a physical force, carrying with it not just the weight of Luffy's conviction, but the accumulated will of everyone who had ever refused to bow to tyranny. Across the battlefield, his crew felt it, a surge of strength and determination that let them push back against odds that should have been impossible. Zoro's swords cut through two CP9 agents like they were made of paper. Sanji's kicks began moving fast enough to ignite the air around them. Even Usopp, terrified but determined, managed to land shots that actually mattered. Crew synchronization, emergency levels, shared determination. Multiplying individual capabilities, warning. System overextension critical, 47 seconds remaining, but the real battle was still between Luffy and Luchi, two forces of nature colliding in the heart of Water 7, while the city itself seemed to hold its breath. "Purpose?" Luchi snarled, his enhanced form moving with impossible speed and precision. "The world government gives me purpose. Order, the elimination of chaos and the establishment of perfect control." "Perfect control over what?" Luffy demanded, deflecting claws that could cut through steel. "Over people who never asked to be controlled, over dreams that don't fit your definition of order." Philosophical argument detected enemy system. Showing signs of ideological conflict, government conditioning. Being challenged by logical inconsistency, recommend. Continue current approach, dreams are chaos, Luchi said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. Individual desires lead to conflict, suffering, war. Only through absolute order can true peace be achieved. Whose peace? Luffy's next attack was faster than lightning, a combination of techniques that shouldn't have been possible to execute simultaneously. Peace for who? The people in power or the people they're controlling? Enemy system. Experiencing critical error, government conditioning. Fragmenting under stress, Rob LUCCI. Identity crisis detected, 31 seconds remaining. The cracks in Luchi's certainty were becoming visible now, manifesting as actual fractures in his enhanced form. The government system that had been augmenting his abilities was starting to conflict with the doubts Luffy's words were creating, causing feedback loops that made his movements erratic and unpredictable. "You're lying," Luchi said, but he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "The government protects people, maintains stability, prevents the chaos that would destroy everything." "By destroying islands full of scholars," Luffy shot back, thinking of Robin's tears. "By hunting 8-year-old girls for the crime of surviving genocide. By building weapons that can level entire nations." 24 seconds remaining, final phase. System purification available, warning. Attempting to purify government system may have severe consequences, success rate, unknown, side effects. Potentially catastrophic, Luffy looked at Luchi, really looked, with all the perception his enhanced system could provide. Underneath the government conditioning, the systematic brutalization of his empathy, the technological augmentation that was turning him into a weapon rather than a person, there was still a human being. Scared, confused, and desperately trying to believe that the horrible things he'd done had been for a good reason. "I'm going to save you too," Luffy said, settling into the stance he'd used to purify Crocodile's corrupted system. "Whether you want me to or not." "Save me?" Luchi's laugh was brittle and sharp. I am perfection incarnate. I am the future of human evolution. I need no salvation from you're a person who got told lies until you believed them, Luffy interrupted. But it's not too late to remember who you used to be. 17 seconds remaining, initiating final purification protocol. Warning. This will consume all remaining system reserves, estimated LIFESBAN cost. 1.5 to 2 years, proceed with full awareness of consequences. 2 years, maybe more. That was what it would cost him to free one government assassin from a lifetime of conditioning and systematic abuse. Luffy thought about Robin, about 20 years of running and hiding and believing herself to be a monster. He thought about all the other people who'd been broken by systems that claimed to protect them while grinding them into dust. Proceed, he said. 11 seconds remaining, the final technique was something new, something the system created by combining every ability Luffy had ever gained with the raw force of his absolute refusal to let anyone suffer alone. Gomu Gomu no, his entire body began to glow with purification energy, but this time it was different. Gentler, more focused on healing than destruction. Liberation Storm. The attack hit Luchi not with force, but with understanding. For just a moment, the government conditioning was stripped away, the technological augmentation shut down, and the man underneath was allowed to remember what it felt like to make his own choices. Government system, purified subject, restored to baseline humanity, lifespan cost, 1 year 8 months, desperation protocol, complete system shutdown, imminent, the world went gray around the edges as the cost hit him. Another streak of white appeared in Luffy's hair, this one broader than the others, and when he caught his reflection in a piece of broken glass, he looked older. Not much, but visibly, measurably older. Luchi collapsed to his knees, staring at his hands like he'd never seen them before. What did I do? Oh God, what did I do? What you were told to do, Luffy said gently, swaying on his feet as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. But you're free now, you can choose what comes next. System functionality, 12% and declining crew status, secure mission parameters, Robin's death flag CLEARED warning, government response incoming buster call. Detected buster call. The world government's ultimate weapon, 10 warships carrying enough firepower to level an island, commanded by 5 vice admirals who'd been given permission to destroy anything in their path. And they were heading straight for Water 7. We need to go, Luffy said, looking around at his crew, who were all staring at him with a mixture of relief, pride, and bone-deep worry about the visible cost of his victory. Now, but even as they prepared to flee, even as the sound of naval artillery began echoing across the horizon, Luffy felt something else stirring in the distance. Not just the government's response to his actions, but something bigger. Something that had been watching and waiting for him to prove himself worthy of a power that was apparently much larger than any of them had imagined. Detecting anomalous energy signatures, classification, extra-dimensional threat assessment. Unknown but massive source. Approaching from multiple vectors, system warning. The monarchs are coming as they sailed away from Water 7, the city burning behind them and the buster calls warships closing in. Luffy stood at the bow of the Mary and watched the horizon. His system was barely functional, his lifespan had been shortened by years, and somewhere out there, beings called monarchs were apparently taking notice of his activities. But Robin was safe, Luchi was free, and his crew was intact. In the grand scheme of things, that felt like a victory worth any price. The third streak of white in his hair caught the wind as they sailed toward whatever impossible challenge waited next. Behind them, the world government's most powerful weapon reduced Water 7 to rubble and ash, but failed to find any trace of the pirates who had dared to challenge 800 years of absolute authority. System evolution. 42% new abilities unlocked. Liberation techniques, warning, major plot threads converging next phase, confrontation with ancient powers estimated difficulty. Transcendent, the grand line stretched out before them, no longer just an ocean of adventure, but a stage for conflicts that would determine the shape of reality itself. And Luffy, with his growing power and shrinking future, was apparently going to be right in the middle of it all. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled across clear skies, and the system whispered warnings about things that should not exist but were coming anyway. Time to find out what it really meant to be the inheritor of Joy Boy's will. The Going Mary limped across the waves like a wounded animal, her timbers groaning with exhaustion that matched the crew huddled on her deck. 3 days had passed since Water 7, and the visible toll of Luffy's desperate battle was written across all their faces, but nowhere more clearly than in the now obvious streaks of white threading through their captain's black hair. Lifespan monitoring, Critical levels estimated remaining 23 years for momentous, rate of decline. Accelerating warning, continued high-level system usage inadvisable 23 years. Luffy stared at the floating numbers with something approaching fascination. He'd burned through nearly a decade of his life in just a few months, trading pieces of his future for the ability to protect the people he loved. And somehow he was okay with that. Luffy, Chopper's voice was small and worried as he approached with his medical bag. You need to let me check your vitals again. The way your cellular aging has accelerated, there could be complications we haven't. I'm fine, Chopper. Luffy's smile was genuine, if tired. Really? Better than fine? How can you say that? Nami exploded, pointing at his prematurely aged hair. Look at yourself. You're literally aging years every time you fight. At this rate, you'll be dead before you're 30. Mathematical analysis confirms Navigator's assessment. Current trajectory. Unsustainable recommendation. Reduce system dependency. Before Luffy could respond, Zoro's voice cut across the deck. We've got company. Big ship approaching from the northeast. The vessel that appeared on the horizon wasn't flying any particular flag, but something about its approach made the hair on the back of Luffy's neck stand up. It moved with purpose, cutting through the waves like it knew exactly where they were and had been hunting them for days. Vessel analysis, modified marine warship, crew signature, single high-level combatant threat assessment, familiar energy signature detected identity. Monkei DGARP, Grandpa, Luffy said, and despite everything, he felt his face split into a grin. The ship pulled alongside with military precision, and Garp leaped across the gap between vessels with the kind of casual superhuman ability that made it clear where Luffy had inherited his ridiculous physical capabilities. He landed on the Mary's deck with a thud that made the entire ship rock, then stood there for a long moment, studying his grandson with eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness. Look at you, Garp said finally, his voice mixing pride and sorrow in equal measure. 3 streaks already. At this rate, you'll burn yourself out before you reach Raftel. Garp knowledge confirmed. System awareness, historical context, previous exposure to Inheritor's emotional state, deep concern mixed with resignation. You know, Luffy said, and it wasn't a question. You've known all along what I am. Garp's laugh was hollow. Known? Boy, I helped bury the last 3 Inheritors I met. Good people, all of them. People who wanted to change the world, make it better. He gestured at Luffy's white-streaked hair. And every single one of them burned through their lives like candles in a hurricane, convinced that the next fight, the next sacrifice would be the one that mattered. This does matter, Luffy said firmly. Robin's free. Crocodile's human again. Enel remembered what it means to care about other people. And how much of your life did each of those victories cost you? Garp's voice carried the weight of someone who'd had this conversation before, with other young idealists who'd thought they could save everyone. 5 years, 10? How long before there's nothing left of Monkey D. Luffy except the power he carried? System analysis. GARP's concerns mathematically valid. Current usage patterns indicate complete burnout within 3-5 years, historical precedent. 15 previous Inheritors, survival rate. 0%, 0%. Every single person who'd ever carried this power had died young, burned out from using abilities that demanded pieces of their soul as payment. Why didn't you stop me? Luffy asked. You're strong enough. You could have dragged me back to the East Blue, locked me up until the system went dormant. Garp's face crumpled slightly, age and regret making him look older than his years. Because I remember what it was like to be young and certain that I could fix everything wrong with the world. Because, he paused, looking out at the horizon, because maybe this time will be different. Before Luffy could ask what he meant, the sea around them began to bubble and churn. Not with heat, but with something darker, an oily blackness that seemed to absorb light and hope in equal measure. Hostile entity detected, power signature. Multiple system fragments, classification. Corrupted Inheritor, threat level. Maximum identity. Marshal D. Teach, Blackbeard. The darkness erupted upward, carrying with it a ship that looked like it had been cobbled together from the wrecks of a dozen different vessels. Pirates swarmed its deck, but all of Luffy's attention was focused on the figure standing at its bow, a man whose very presence made the system scream warnings. Blackbeard had changed since their last encounter. Where before he'd been merely dangerous, now he radiated power that felt wrong on a fundamental level. Twisted fragments of different systems clung to his massive frame like parasites, each one pulsing with stolen life force and accumulated suffering. Marshal D. Teach, System Analysis Primary, YAMI no MI plus Gura Gura no MI Secondary. 7 stolen system fragments from murdered inheritors, corruption level, beyond measurement, psychological status. Complete dissociation from humanity, special ability. Can steal system fragments from living hosts. Well, Blackbeard's voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords working in unison. If it isn't the newest little inheritor playing with powers he doesn't understand. Teach, Garp's voice was flat, deadly. You were supposed to be in Impel Down. Zahahaha, prison is for people who accept limitations, old man. I've transcended such petty concerns. Blackbeard's eyes fixed on Luffy with predatory hunger. 7 systems I've collected so far, torn from the cooling corpses of their previous owners. But yours is special, isn't it? Pure inheritance, untainted by corruption or compromise. System emergency protocols activating inheritor protection mode. Engaged, warning, enemy can permanently steal system access. Death in combat would result in total power absorption. You killed them, Luffy said, the words coming out flat and certain. 7 people like me, and you murdered them for their power. Murdered, Blackbeard laughed, the sound like grinding glass. I liberated them from the burden of choice. They were weak, indecisive, too concerned with the cost of using their abilities properly. I simply redistributed their power to someone with the will to use it. The stolen system fragments around Blackbeard pulsed brighter, and Luffy could swear he heard voices whispering from within them, the dying screams of people who tried to do good and paid for it with everything they were. Grandpa, Luffy said quietly, not taking his eyes off Blackbeard, get my crew out of here. Boy, this isn't a request. Luffy's voice carried the absolute authority that had gotten him through every impossible situation so far. He's here for me, and anyone else who stays is going to die. Get them to safety. Crew Protection Protocol, Priority Override Garp Cooperation, Probable Tactical Assessment, Solo Combat Inadvisable Enemy Power Level. EXCEDS Host Capabilities, the system was right. Blackbeard with 7 stolen system fragments was probably stronger than anything Luffy had ever faced. But that didn't matter. Some fights weren't about winning, they were about making sure the people you cared about lived to see tomorrow. Zahahaha, Blackbeard's amusement was genuine and terrifying. Look at him, crew. Willing to die alone rather than risk his precious friends. How noble, how utterly pointless. There's nothing pointless about protecting the people you love, Luffy said, settling into a fighting stance as his own system began cycling through every ability he'd ever gained. That's what power is really for. Power is for taking what you want, Blackbeard roared, darkness swirling around him as he prepared to unleash 8 different system enhancements simultaneously. For becoming strong enough that no one can ever hurt you again. Enemy attack imminent, multiple system combination detected, recommend, full defensive protocols, warning, survival probability 23%, 23%. The same number as the years Luffy had left to live. Somehow, that felt appropriate. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. 8 different inheritor systems, 7 of them twisted by murder and theft, clashing in the middle of the ocean while reality itself seemed to strain under the weight of so much concentrated power. Blackbeard fought like a force of nature, gravity manipulation from one stolen fragment, time dilation from another, matter conversion, energy absorption, reality warping. Each attack was backed by the accumulated life force of 7 murdered inheritors, making him faster, stronger, and more versatile than any single system user had a right to be. But Luffy fought with something Blackbeard couldn't steal or corrupt, the absolute certainty that some things were worth dying for. System synchronization, maximum all abilities, online and enhanced, lifespan expenditure, extreme levels warning. Current output unsustainable, every technique Luffy had ever learned, every ability the system had granted him, every lesson in sacrifice and determination. All of it came online simultaneously, burning through years of his life to fuel power that made his previous battles look like playground scuffles. Gear second and third together, whether manipulation spinning hurricanes around his fists, Conqueror's hockey so intense it was turning the sea itself solid, purification energy ready to cleanse the stolen fragments from Blackbeard's corrupted soul. Impossible, Blackbeard snarled, 7 different systems working in unison to counter Luffy's assault. You're just one system, I have 8, I should be. You have 7 corpses and 1 coward, Luffy interrupted, his voice carrying across the battlefield like thunder. I have something you'll never understand. Final technique available, Liberation Storm maximum output warning. This will consume Forminus 6 years of remaining LIFESBAN, success rate, 67% side effects. Potentially fatal proceed, 6 years, maybe more. That would leave him with maybe 15 years of life, assuming he survived the technique at all. Luffy thought about all the stolen systems wrapped around Blackbeard, all the people who died trying to make the world better, all the futures that had been cut short by one man's greed and cowardice. Proceed, he said, initiating maximum liberation protocol, drawing power from core life force, all safety limitations. Removed, the technique that followed was less an attack than a force of nature. Pure liberation energy, backed by every year Luffy was willing to sacrifice, slammed into Blackbeard's stolen power with the force of absolute moral certainty. The stolen system fragments screamed as they were torn away from their corrupted host, 7 different voices crying out in relief as they were finally freed from the man who had murdered their original owners. Light erupted from each fragment as it dissolved, carrying with it the essence of people who had died trying to do good. Stolen SYSTMS, purified and released Blackbeard, REDUCED to baseline human plus devil fruits technique cost. 5 years 2 MONTHS, current LIFESBAN estimate, 18 years 2 MONTHS, host status. Critical but stable, Luffy hit the deck of the Mary hard enough to crack the wood, his entire body smoking from the power expenditure. When he managed to lift his head, he saw Blackbeard floating unconscious in the water, his stolen systems gone, and his body returned to merely human proportions. But the real change was in Luffy himself. The 4th streak of white in his hair was broad and prominent now, and when he caught his reflection in a puddle of seawater, he looked visibly older. Not dramatically, but enough to make it clear that every victory was costing him pieces of his future. System evolution, 78% massive experience GAINED from liberating stolen fragments, new abilities unlocked, soul resonance, temporal perception, special achievement. Returned 7 murdered inheritors to eternal rest. Final quest available, the golden text that appeared was different from all the others. Larger, more ornate, pulsing with an importance that made Luffy's chest tight with recognition. Ultimate quest, reach Laugh-Tale objective. Restore the true system to its intended state, warning. Current system is incomplete fragment, completion will require ultimate sacrifice, estimated cost, remaining LIFESBAN reward. Salvation of all future inheritors except quest. Luffy stared at the floating text, understanding flooding through him like cold water. The system he carried wasn't the complete power Joy Boy had intended to pass down. It was just a fragment, a piece of something much larger that had been scattered across the centuries to prevent any one person from being consumed by its full weight. But at Laugh-Tale, all the fragments could be reunited. The system could be restored to its true purpose, not as a tool for individuals to burn through their lives, but as something that could change the fundamental nature of the world itself. All it would cost him was everything he had left. Except, he said quietly, and felt the weight of destiny settle on his shoulders like a comfortable coat. Ultimate quest accepted navigation data, updated final destination, Laugh-Tale estimated journey time. 6 MONTHS system message. Joy Boy is waiting, as Garp's ship pulled alongside to offer aid, as Blackbeard was hauled unconscious from the water, as his crew surrounded him with worry and love and the kind of loyalty that transcended individual concerns, Luffy felt something like peace settle in his chest. He was going to die completing this quest. The math was simple and unavoidable, 18 years of life left, and a final technique that would require all of it. But in exchange, no one else would ever have to burn through their future the way he had. No more inheritors dying young, no more power that demanded pieces of your soul as payment. "Hey guys," he said, looking around at his crew's worried faces. "How do you feel about going to the end of the world?" The white streaks in his hair caught the setting sun as they sailed toward whatever final challenge waited at Laugh-Tale, and somewhere in the back of his mind, Luffy could swear he heard someone laughing, not with malice, but with the kind of joy that came from seeing a promise finally kept after 800 years of waiting. Laugh-Tale appeared on the horizon like a memory made solid. An island that seemed to shift and shimmer with each wave that carried them closer, as if reality itself wasn't quite sure what to make of the place where the Pirate King had left his greatest treasure. Destination confirmed. Laugh-Tale system resonance. Maximum ancient power concentration, unprecedented levels, warning. Final quest parameters initializing, estimated survival probability. 0%. Luffy stood at the Going Mary's bow, his white-streaked hair catching the morning light as he studied the island that had been Gold Roger's final destination. 6 months had passed since the battle with Blackbeard, and the visible toll of his system usage had only grown more pronounced. 4 broad streaks of premature aging now threaded through his black hair, and when he smiled, there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. But despite the physical cost, despite the system's constant warnings about his dwindling lifespan, Luffy had never felt more certain about anything in his life. 18 years, 2 months, Chopper said quietly from beside him, reading the medical data that only he and Luffy could see. That's what you have left, isn't it, if you don't use any more high-level techniques? Something like that, Luffy agreed, his voice carrying the kind of calm acceptance that came from making peace with impossible choices. And the final quest will take all of it. Yeah, Luffy's smile was sad but genuine. Every last minute. Crew emotional state, mixed grief and determination Zoro, resigned loyalty Nami. Desperate search for alternatives Sanji. Protective anger Usopp. Terrified but committed Chopper. Medical frustration Robin. Scholarly understanding of necessity. Behind them, the rest of the crew was dealing with the knowledge in their own ways. Zoro had gone quiet and deadly, sharpening his swords with mechanical precision. Nami kept checking and rechecking her charts, as if the right navigation might somehow change their destination. Sanji chain-smoked and cooked elaborate meals nobody had much appetite for. But Robin understood. She'd spent her life studying the Void Century, and she knew better than anyone that some sacrifices were necessary to break cycles that had persisted for 800 years. There has to be another way, Nami said for the 100th time, her voice tight with desperate hope. Some alternative the system hasn't considered. Alternative analysis, complete partial system restoration. Insufficient to break cycle, incomplete restoration. Will result in continued inheritor deaths, mathematical certainty. Full restoration requires complete sacrifice. There isn't, Luffy said gently. Trust me, I've asked. The system's been pretty clear about the math. As if summoned by his words, more interface windows began appearing, overlaying his vision with data that made the scope of what they were approaching impossible to ignore. Laugh tail analysis complete island status. Nexus point 4 all system fragments. Current fragments detected 847 pieces. Original system state. 1 complete unit restoration process. Requires willing sacrifice of final inheritor. 847 fragments. Scattered across the world, carried by people who'd never known they possessed pieces of Joy Boy's legacy, hidden in ancient weapons and lost technologies and the dreams of everyone who'd ever refused to give up. All of it waiting to be reunited by someone willing to pay the ultimate price. Why? Usopp asked, his voice cracking slightly. Why does it have to be you? Why can't someone else? Because I'm the one it chose, Luffy said simply. Because I'm the one who's been gathering the fragments, learning what the power is really for. Because... He paused, looking around at his crew with eyes that held too much understanding for someone his age. Because I'm the only one who's strong enough to let it go. Approach detected. Laugh-tail Guardians classification. Ethereal manifestations identity. Previous pirate kings emotional state. Welcoming but solemn, the figures that emerged from Laugh-tail's mists weren't quite solid, but they were undeniably real. Gall D. Roger stood at their head, his mustache and confident grin exactly as Luffy had imagined them, but his eyes held depths of sorrow that spoke of understanding what lay ahead. Beside him stood other legends, Rox D. Zebek, Captain John, even figures from further back in history whose names had been lost but whose will had never truly died. All of them pirate kings in their own way, all of them guardians now of the treasure that had been too dangerous for any one person to claim. Monkey D. Luffy, Roger's voice carried across the water like an echo from the past. You made it. I honestly wasn't sure anyone would. The others didn't, Luffy asked, thinking of all the inheritors who'd burned through their lives before reaching this point. The others tried to hoard the power, another figure said, a woman whose scarred face spoke of battles fought for principles rather than glory. They thought strength was about what you could take, not what you could give. Historical context. Previous inheritors' common failure point. Inability to release power success requirement. Complete selflessness, current assessment. Mon Ked Luffy meets criteria, but you're different, Roger continued, his grin widening. You've been giving pieces of yourself away since the moment the system awakened. Saving enemies, freeing kingdoms, sacrificing years of your life for people you barely knew. That's what it's for, Luffy said, and the certainty in his voice made several of the ghostly pirates nod approvingly. Exactly, Roger laughed, the sound carrying joy and pride in equal measure. That's what Joy Boy always said. The power isn't meant to make one person stronger, it's meant to make everyone free. Accessing historical data. Joy Boy's original vision, system purpose, awaken individual potential in all people, intended effect. Eliminate need for hierarchical power structures, corruption point. System fragmented to prevent misuse, restoration goal. Return power to its distributed state, understanding flooded through Luffy like warm light. The system hadn't been designed to create superpowered individuals who burned through their lives fighting impossible battles. It had been meant to awaken the potential that already existed in everyone, to make it so that ordinary people could stand up to tyrants, so that dreams didn't require supernatural power to achieve. The fragmentation had been intentional, a safeguard put in place when the original wielders realized that concentrated power inevitably led to corruption, even among the well-intentioned. "So what happens?" he asked the ghostly assembly. "I complete the restoration and then everyone gets what they need to chase their own dreams," Roger said. "Not system fragments or inherited power, but something deeper, the awakening of will itself. The strength that comes from refusing to give up, no matter how impossible things look." Restoration preview, global awakening effect. All individuals gain access to basic system functions, scale. Moderate enhancement, no LIFESBAN cost, result. End of power BASED oppression, special note. Original system carrier role BCOMES obsolete. A world where everyone could be strong enough to protect what they loved. Where tyrants couldn't rely on superior force to maintain control. Where dreams were limited only by imagination and determination, not by accident of birth or devil fruit lottery. It was everything Luffy had been fighting for, wrapped up in a single choice. "Luffy," Nami's voice was thick with tears she was trying not to shed, "there has to be another way. Please?" He turned to look at his crew, really look, with all the enhanced perception the system had given him. Zoro's unwavering loyalty, even in the face of losing his captain. Nami's desperate love disguised as pragmatic concern. Sanji's protective instincts warring with his understanding of necessity. Usopp's terror mixed with absolute faith. Chopper's medical drive to save everyone, even when the patient didn't want to be saved. Robin's scholarly acceptance of historical inevitability. They were his family, his chosen nakama, the people who'd followed him to the end of the world and would follow him beyond it if he asked, which was exactly why he couldn't ask. Final quest, ready to initialize restoration ritual, available estimated duration, 12 minutes lifespan cost, complete global impact, permanent positive change except final parameters. "Actually," Luffy said, his voice carrying a note that made everyone living and dead pay attention. "I want to change the terms." Roger raised an eyebrow. "Change them how? The system keeps talking about sacrifice and giving up everything, but that's not what Joy Boy really wanted, was it?" Luffy's grin was sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. "He wanted to share the power, not destroy it. So what if instead of me dying to restore the system, I shared the cost?" Alternative proposal detected analyzing feasibility. Error. Insufficient data for proper analysis. Recommend. Clarification of TERMS. "I've got the best crew in the world," Luffy continued, looking around at his nakama with eyes that held infinite trust. "People who have been sharing my journey every step of the way. What if they shared this too?" Understanding dawned on Robin's face first, followed quickly by the others. Not death, division. Instead of one person paying the ultimate price, 6 people paying a fraction of it. "Luffy," Zoro said quietly, "if you're asking what I think you're asking, I'm asking if you trust me." Luffy's voice was soft but carried absolute certainty. "I'm asking if you're willing to give up a few years of your lives so that everyone in the world can have the chance to be free." Crew sharing protocol. Theoretically possible, lifespan cost distribution. 6 ways, individual cost. Approximately 3 years per person, success probability. 89%, warning, unprecedented technique, 3 years each. Still a significant cost but survivable, manageable. The kind of price that heroes paid willingly when the alternative was watching the world burn. "Are you kidding?" Nami wiped her eyes and managed a shaky smile. "We've come this far together. Like hell we're letting you finish it alone." "I'm in," Sanji said, stubbing out his cigarette. "Someone's got to make sure you don't do anything too stupid." "Obviously I'm coming," Zoro added. "Someone needs to make sure the cook doesn't screw it up. If it helps everyone," Usopp stammered, "then of course. I mean, I'm the great Captain Usopp. This is exactly the kind of heroic sacrifice I'd make." "The medical implications are fascinating," Chopper said, his doctor brain already working through the logistics. "Shared system integration at the cellular level will need to monitor for complications, but theoretically. The historical significance alone makes it worthwhile," Robin added. to witness the restoration of Joy Boy's vision firsthand to help write the final chapter of an 800-year story. Crew consensus, unanimous agreement, shared restoration ritual, initializing new parameters. 6-person system integration, individual cost, 3 years to momentous, global benefit, unchanged success probability, 91% special achievement. First successful collaborative restoration, Roger's laughter rang across the water, pure joy and pride mixing in equal measure. Now that's what I call a pirate crew. Joy Boy would be so proud. He is proud, said a new voice, and Luffy felt his breath catch as a figure materialized from the mists of Laugh Tale. Taller than Roger, with eyes that held the weight of centuries and a smile that contained the dreams of everyone who'd ever refused to give up. Joy Boy himself, the original inheritor, the man whose will had shaped 800 years of history. "Hello, Monkey D. Luffy," Joy Boy said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated with the system in Luffy's consciousness. "I've been waiting a very long time to meet you." System founder detected Joy Boy. Original architect status. Willing to transfer complete authority, message waiting. 800 years in queue. "You really did it," Joy Boy continued, looking around at Luffy's crew with obvious approval. "You figured out what the power was really for, not to make yourself stronger, but to make everyone else free." "It just seemed obvious," Luffy said, feeling suddenly bashful in the presence of someone whose dreams had shaped his entire world. "Power's supposed to be shared, right? That's what Nakama means." "Exactly." Joy Boy's smile could have lit up the entire ocean. "And that's why you're ready for this." The restoration ritual that followed was unlike anything any of them had imagined. Instead of sacrifice and loss, it felt like coming home. The system fragments scattered across the world began to resonate, drawn by the combined will of 6 people who understood that true strength came from lifting others up rather than standing alone. Global system restoration, 23% complete, fragments converging, 847 of 847 worldwide awakening, initiating individual cost. 3 years 1 month per participant, light erupted from Laugh Tale, not the harsh glare of destruction but the warm glow of possibility made manifest. It spread outward in waves, washing over every island, every ocean, every person in the world. And everywhere it touched, people felt something change inside them. Not dramatic transformation, not sudden overwhelming power, but something simpler and infinitely more valuable. The quiet certainty that they were strong enough to protect what they loved, brave enough to chase their dreams, and free enough to choose their own path. Restoration complete, global awakening, successful system status. Fully distributed individual fragments, dormant but recoverable through personal growth, oppression-based power structures. No longer sustainable new age. Initiated when the light faded, Luffy found himself standing on Laugh Tale's beach, his crew beside him and his hair now showing 5 distinct streaks of white. But he was alive, they were all alive, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the world was awakening to possibilities it had forgotten existed. "So," he said, grinning at his nakama with the kind of joy that made the sun seem dim by comparison, "what do we do now?" "Now." Robin's smile was radiant as she gestured toward the ocean that stretched endlessly in all directions. "Now we sail. There's a whole world full of newly awakened dreamers out there, and they're going to need examples of what's possible." Quest complete. Inherited dream fulfilled, system status. Evolution to universal access, Pirate King achievement. Unlocked through liberation rather than domination, new adventure parameters. Unlimited special note. Joy Boy's WILL has been inherited by entire world. As they sailed away from Laugh Tale, Luffy stood at the bow of the Going Merry and watched the horizon. The grand line stretched out before them, no longer just an ocean of danger and adventure, but a sea of infinite possibility where anyone with enough determination could chase their dreams to the very ends of the earth. His hair was streaked with premature white, his lifespan shortened by years of sacrifice, and his system reduced to a fraction of its former power. But he'd never felt stronger, never felt more complete, never felt more like the Pirate King he'd always known he could become. Because being the Pirate King wasn't about having the most power or the biggest crew or the greatest treasure. It was about being free and helping others find their own freedom. And now, thanks to 6 friends who'd been willing to share the cost of an 800-year dream, everyone in the world had that chance. End of System Chronicle, beginning of New Age, the inherited dream lives on behind them, Laugh Tale faded into the morning mist. Ahead of them, 1,000 islands full of newly awakened dreamers waited to see what was possible when ordinary people refused to accept the impossible. Luffy adjusted his straw hat, shared a grin with his nakama, and sailed toward whatever adventure was waiting just beyond the horizon. The age of inheritors was over. The age of everyone had begun. And that, he thought as the wind filled their sails and carried them toward tomorrow, was exactly what Joy Boy had been laughing about all along. System offline, dream online, adventure continuing. What a ride, from a lightning strike in Logtown to literally awakening the world's potential at Laugh Tale. Luffy burned through years of his life but learned the most important lesson: real strength isn't about what you can take, it's about what you're willing to give. That ending though, instead of going out in a blaze of glory, he convinced his crew to share the burden. Because of course he did, that's peak Luffy right there. What hit you the hardest? Luffy aging with every fight. That brutal Blackbeard showdown? Let me know below. Hit subscribe for more wild crossovers and peace out.